This podcast is brought to you by Ranch Vision, the software ranchers use to boost profits and make better decisions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Brazil. I am the founder of Ranch Vision. This program was designed for producers like you. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind, forward-looking software program that enables you to see the results of your management decisions months and years into the future, from your herd numbers to your replacement costs, break-even values, enterprise efficiency, your profit and loss, your cash flow, and so much more. With this program, you can move forward with confidence into the future. Ranch Vision isn't a historical record-keeping program like all the other programs you might have seen. It looks forward. It is a very challenging, very competitive industry, and every ranch business is unique, has different variables, different opportunities, different constraints. Ranch Vision was designed to take uncertainty out of your future, to enable you to plan to profit. Please go to our website to learn more, www.ranchvision.io. Grazing livestock and just grazing animals in general are a significant part of the planet. That really is the planet.
The average age of the farmer in America is 58 years old. That is not sustainable.
We've been hit with water curtailments. We've been hit with low prices by the conditions, by the rain, by the lamb crop, by the calf crop.
I heard a Native American gentleman say, wilderness, that's an invention of the white man, because we took care of this land.
Sometimes fighting doesn't mean shouting and screaming and pounding your fist. Sometimes it's just putting your boots on and being there for work the next day.
It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people.
There are cowboys still around. You just probably don't see them because we're working all the time.
I'm Keely Brazil Cavello, and this is America UNWON.
My guest today spent nearly 3 decades as California game warden, and for most of that career, he was fighting an invisible war most Americans have no idea is even happening. In 2005, he was in a gunfight with cartel gunmen in the mountains above Silicon Valley within eyesight of the eBay campus, if you can believe that visual. And out of that came the marijuana enforcement team, the elite tactical unit he co-founded and led for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, along with the department's first wilderness sniper unit. He's a recipient of the Governor's Medal of Valor. He's the author of War in the Woods, which is the precursor to this book that I have here, the best-selling Hidden War, has a foreword by Jack Carr, absolutely amazing book. You've seen him across 3 seasons of Nat Geo's Wild Justice. You've heard him on Rogan. He co-hosts the Thin Green Line podcast. And he's testified before the House Natural Resources Committee on cartel operations in our national parks and on tribal land. He also founded El Oasis, a nonprofit sheltering orphan kids in Baja, Mexico, which we're going to get into all of this because I don't think enough people ask him about that. John and I got connected after I made a documentary about a murder in my home county, the kind of murder that he has spent his whole career trying to prevent. And we've been talking ever since. John Norris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with me today.
So good to finally talk with you, Keely. Like visually, this is great.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me on. I got a kindred spirit. I've been really looking forward to this. So yeah, great to be here.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for making time. I know you have so much going on. This book, I just was telling John before we started recording, I reread it before our interview. It is so good, and it is just action-packed. He tells all of these stories from the field, but kind of weaves into it the story of what's happening on our public lands, which is a very underreported and very important story. There's one scene from this book that has really stuck with me that I love. To me, this kind of typifies everything about your career. A mule train packing weed out of the California mountains. Just say less. NorCal in one sentence, one phrase. Did you have a second where you were just like, my job is wild?
Yeah, Keely, that was a wild moment. So we didn't have helicopter support that day, and we got into way more, toxically tainted cartel cannabis and weed. And like, how are we going to get this stuff off the mountain, man? We can't, this is not something we're going to be able to hike out ourselves. And basically a pack train, organizer that I knew lived at the bottom of the, ranch we were on near the grow site, had all of his mules in Yosemite for the pack season because it was summer, except old Stanley, who was semi-retired, this old mule named Stanley. He was just amazing. So sure enough, Stanley went on overtime, came out of retirement, and helped us get all that marijuana, most of that marijuana off the hill. And we were rolling burritos of it up in tarps and still getting it off the mountain ourselves. And at that point, trying to deal with the cartel poisons that, we can talk about as we go on and how devastating those are. But yeah, it's one of those things that when we formed up the Met team from a special operations standpoint, it was kind of do what you can where you're at with what you have. And sometimes you don't have the resources you need, So we had the term, and you see it in the book, fill and flow. And that simply means we're going to come up against a ton of obstacles. And the first gunfight I was in 2005 was it was horrible from the standpoint that we were even ambushed, and that my partner Warden took an AK-47 round through both legs, and almost a 3-hour air rescue wait to get him off that mountain, and him almost bleeding out, and going into shock and not making it. We were within minutes from him not surviving. You're not prepared for that day fully, no matter how much you prepare. So you just got to fill and flow. You got to do the best you can with what you have. And if there's an obstacle, you don't try to pound your head through it. You go around it. Military units like the Marine Corps say, improvise, overcome, and adapt. We have kind of that same idea, but fill and flow like water. Water doesn't get blocked by anything. It just goes around it. And we're an environmental based team anyway. So we coined that term. And that was a fill and flow day with Stanley. It's like, hey, we need to think outside the box, and we have assets, we have friends. And that growth site happened to be, the book, as you mentioned, has a ton of missions from all over the state. But some of those pivotal origin missions happened literally within 10 air miles of where I'm sitting right now. I'm back in California. And as you know, I live full time in Montana now for the last 8 years since operational retirement, but spend 30 to 40% of the year here in the Golden State, because like you, I was born and raised here, and I love the resources here. I love the people here. I grew up on cattle ranches like you did. I grew up in the state park, Henrico State Park, right above, the South Silicon Valley where I grew up, went to school, San Jose State graduate, college here, the whole 9 yards. And I learned about wildlife in the Golden State, and I learned about cattle ranching as conservationists, and we're a huge agricultural state. And it's heartbreaking to see what some of that has eroded into, especially with the cartel cannabis epidemic that started here at ground zero in California. So I'm still spending a lot of time here, still working those issues, as well as the ranch issues and conservation and everything else. But yeah, fill and flow, man. Stanley saved our bacon that day. And, I still am friends with that gentleman that runs those pack mules. They're long since retired. That was a while ago. But it also, and I'm sure you can resonate with this, to have any stock that we're actually working, whether we're on horseback for wilderness patrol, which our Met was trained to do, and occasionally would have to get on horseback because you're going into a wilderness area and you got grows at 10, 11, 12,000 feet, no motor vehicles, pristine areas. And of course, their poisons are the worst up there in mountain, basically in bighorn sheep country, in golden trout country, in those pristine mountain alpine-like lakes. And we're getting around on horseback, man. If you don't know how to ride, you're going to learn quick. But like you, a lot of us had that background. We may not be working cattle ranchers right now, but we're certainly ready to jump on a horse and assist where we need to. And I just love working with stock, and it's amazing what mules can do and how helpful they are. And that day was one of those standout missions that made it a little more fun and nostalgic, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, it definitely shows the nature of your job, and things can get Western pretty quick, as you talk about, literally and figuratively. Yeah, and you're just kind of out there in these very, very remote, isolated places. You've done a lot of interviews with some phenomenal podcasts, gone very viral talking about this issue. I think you're probably the main reason anybody has any familiarity with this issue. And in most of those interviews, the host was pretty unfamiliar with the topic, right? And it's kind of an unusual conversation. Not a lot of people know about this. This conversation is a little different because I did grow up in the Emerald Triangle.
Right.
We're both rural Californians, but I think, having that experience, I've accidentally hunted in, the National Forest and stumbled into a massive grow site. I've ridden horses and stumbled into a grow site. It's very scary. And I was there by accident. I was not there as a law enforcement officer. So it's just an epidemic that is totally affecting not only California, but as we'll get into, an increasingly large part of the United States. But for folks listening who have never been in a grow site, who've never seen this, can you just describe what it's like to walk into a grow site on public land and what you're seeing, what you're smelling, what you're sensing, what's going on in our public land?
Yeah, that's a great question. And no one's ever quite asked it like that, Keely. So one, thank you, because what I tried to do in both books, and especially in Hidden War in the second edition that you just read, and thank you so much for diving in, is create a visceral picture of how mind-blowing it is. First and foremost, you and I know what it's like to be off trail, going down an oak scrub woodland or manzanita country, or even, conifers, say in the Diablo range, because California is so diverse. And you're expecting to go down, wild trails, animal trails, find waterways, water your stock, maybe find a fishing hole, maybe just find a place to what we do just to reset, right? To recharge. My family has a saying. It started with my grandfather, who is career Navy, survived Pearl Harbor in World War II, did 20 years. And he said, hey, we're going to settle in Montana, family, Norris clan. I'm going to get 20 acres. The woods are our church. And we want to find a place that we can always resonate, connect spiritually with God in nature. And when I think about the woods being my church, I think the same thing for what you're doing out there, because we resonate with that deep love for the outdoors, the wilderness, wildlands, waterways, and wildlife. And when you're expecting to see that, and even as a game warden, you might go down a trail and a water diversion happens, and you expect to see someone's diverting the water for maybe a gold dredging operation or an illegal field. Maybe it's a rancher pulling water that he's not supposed to, or whatever. And I'll take the example from '04 when I stumbled into that first grow in the first book. And I was called by a really good friend. He was kind of a fifth member. There's, 4 kids in my family. And my mom called us the Wolf Pack. I was out running around in the woods, kind of wild. And GI, which is his code name in the first book, didn't go into law enforcement, but became a fisheries biologist, undergrad and graduate work at San Jose State while I was doing the same programs in criminal justice at State. And he called me one day. He was doing a transect study of red-legged, yellow-legged frog and steelhead trout migrating all the way up from the ocean, coming up Bodfish Creek into South Santa Clara County, where the Gilroy, the garlic capital of the world, which I grew up really close to, all the way up to these little tributaries to Coyote Creek that Henrico Park trickles out of. And it's April. And rain runoff, as you know, at that time of year, a non-drought year, is really significant. So we studied in 2 creeks. One creek is bone dry in the middle of April. And everything he's been studying, the steelhead have already spawned, all the frogs have gone through their breeding, and they're going through their hatch and all that. And everything's just dead. The creek is completely dry, 4 miles. And he calls me in a panic, like, John, someone diverted the water up top. This is crazy. Everything's dead. I mean, we had 1 steelhead migration this year. They're threatened and endangered right now. They're limited fish. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service puts them at like a $40,000 per fish if you put a monetary value of how rare the steelhead trout is to even make it inland and spawn. So I go, okay, jump in the truck, man. Let's go. Let's see what's up. We drive to the top of this mountain, and we just start working down the canyon to find the waterway to try to get above where the diversion is and tactically work uphill first down into the creek. Now, GI isn't armed, but he's a really savvy outdoorsman. He hunts, he fishes, and, I could put a weapon in his hand and he could be a skilled med operator within minutes. He's that good. And we start going down the creek. We get into a canyon that looks like a mini Grand Canyon, big cliffs of granite and, your fern beds and things like that, almost like the redwood forest. And then we get to the dam. And this is where the, oh crap, pucker factor kind of kicked in, because this was, and there's pictures of it in Hidden War and the first book, but the color pictures are in the book that you've got, the second edition of Hidden War. Visqueen lined plastic, black plastic, and they dug out the creek to a point where and put a hand-built earthen dam on the downstream side of the creek and basically impounded a pond of the last of the water to this little tributary to Coyote Creek that GI was studying. And then below the dam is a black poly pipe, a 1/2-inch black polymer pipe, which I did not know at the time was the telltale sign of a cartel grow, like I'm sure you stumbled into. Sinaloa Cartel, that's their SOP. That's the equipment they use. They use black poly pipe because it's really durable. It can be camouflaged really easily. But the last thing we thought we were going into was anything like a cartel grow. I thought, wow, this is weird. Why would they divert the water that way? And where's this hose going? And it's just working straight down the dry creek bed dead center, which was kind of odd. It wasn't going left or right, south or north on the hillside. So it wasn't going to an adjoining property. It was going straight down canyon. And so, spider senses are up. So we start moving very carefully, very tactically, very quietly, and staying to the creek bank where we have a lot of concealment. And as we're going down that trail, after about 70 yards of this pipe, then we start to see 18-inch marijuana plants cut out on both sides of the bank, carefully terraced, but with a lot of manzanita around them, and everything was really kind of visually camouflaged. We could see it because we were at eye level and we were in the center of it. One thing I noticed right away is, hey man, this is weird. This is a marijuana garden, and it's big. It's not your mom and pop, white boy, quote unquote, high school grow. This is serious because how'd they get here? Locked gate. We're 3 or 4 miles up the top of a ridge. And as we progress a little further, we just kind of stop. And I go, this is really strange. I can see, there's water in the holes of some of the plants. I haven't seen an encampment yet. I haven't seen men yet, but a couple seconds, we see the guys. And here come 2 guys, and they're in battle dress uniform, OD green, kind of Vietnam era military clothing, like my dad wore in the Army, and any of my relatives that fought in the Vietnam conflict, and several did. I went, this is weird. They looked dark, Latin descent. They were super silent. There were 2 of them. The guy in the front was kind of on the point, working his way down, and he would stop and check a plant. And what I didn't know he was checking at the time were these little water emitters on drip emitters that were kind of spiraled and spider-webbed off of some of the main water lines. The water diversions these cartels use are ingenious, and they're hard to put in. What these guys go through to get a gravity-fed constant flow with pressure to, basically irrigate anywhere from 5 to 20,000 plants in some of the largest grows that you would see in the Emerald Triangle, or even down here in the Silicon Valley foothills where I started, is mind-blowing. It's an engineering marvel, and I don't take that lightly, when I'm looking at that type of adversary. But what we saw is the guy in the front's working on water lines and making sure his plants are good. He'll pull out trimmers, machetes sometimes, and cut base of stalks. He's kind of pruning the plants. The guy behind him was like a security cover guy. Had a long gun, like an AK derivative, AK-47 derivative. Looked like he had a holster on his hip. He had a large knife as well. And that guy in the back is doing what we would do on a tactical unit. He's scanning left to right with his weapon and not saying a word. They're not even whispering to each other. They're just giving each other little signals, maybe a little hand signal, not even talking. And I went, wow, man, this is tactical proficiency. Now, we didn't have our own tactical unit yet, but at the time I had already immersed with the local Bay Area, Silicon Valley SWAT units and the sheriff's office, and become a sniper school instructor, and was building to get to the point where we were going to eventually hopefully have our own tactical unit, because we were going to be needed for something. Post 9/11, mutual aid, some of these school shootings, whatever. I had no idea it would be around a cartel threat, and we'd be targeting that in marijuana grows on public and private land. But fortunately, we were savvy to what we were seeing, and GI had some, tactical know-how as well. So we're hiding in the cut bank, and these guys are working their way toward us and getting closer and closer. And I've got an AR-15 with my red dot, and he's an unarmed civilian. We have no radio coverage. We're buried in a canyon. There's no cell coverage. And I've got my red dot up on the guy that's got the weapon that I see. And I'm like, this is going to be the most horrendous situation if we're detected, because there was no way I thought these guys were just going to give up. They did not belong there. They definitely didn't look like American citizens. And I wasn't making a disparaging comment. I'm just looking at what I'm up against. And so I held my breath. The adrenaline dumped. I made sure we were in the best cover concealment we could. We were 15 yards from these guys. That's not far, 75 feet. And by the good graces, they didn't see us. They kind of looked at each other, maybe made a hand signal. It's been a lot of years, but they communicated somehow, and they turned away and they worked back downstream where the grow continued. And of course, we weren't going to go any further. So we let them get well out of the area, and then gave them plenty of time to get some distance. and just watched our backside kind of bounding as we went up the mountain again and got to the truck. The whole time, my eyes are big as silver dollars. My adrenaline's dumping. I felt no fatigue racing up that mountain because my mind was just going, okay, this is not a typical game warden thing. What I expected to see was absolutely bizarrely, contradictory to it. It was nothing I would have expected. But one thing about being a game warden that's so cool and unique, part of the law enforcement role that we have is we're working alone all the time. And every day is uniquely different, Keely, as you know. The game warden job is so diverse. And one day you're checking hunting licenses. The next day, maybe you're doing a release of a golden eagle that's been rehabbed, or a bobcat, or you're talking to a school group on conservation, and wildlife ID, and you're teaching hunter safety, or you're taking down, you're in the middle of a prosecution and you're doing an investigation on an endangered and threatened K-rat that lives in the Silicon Valley, and these developers haven't done mitigation and they've killed a K-rat. And now it's a federally listed endangered species federal case against a multi-million, maybe $1 billion corporation, environmental crime, water pollution, you name it, or an oil spill. And you're going, okay, I just wanted to go catch a bad guy with, an over limit of fish today, or a spotlighter tonight. So we're very adaptable and we're not shocked by much. This was beyond that level of an unusual day, but it made me realize that was the most destructive crime I could see going on anywhere in my home county. And keep in mind, this is my backyard. So I grew up literally around this creek. This was now Open Space Authority property, but it used to be called the Pallisu Ranch before it was sold to the county. And it was a blacktail deer hunting club. It was a working cattle ranch. I grew up all around that with those cattlemen. And now I'm a game warden, and it's public land. It's not open to the public yet. And here's one of my best friends I grew up with since second grade. Like I said, great friend of the family. And he finds this crime, and he's as heartbroken and pissed off as I am. And I mean, what happened if he was alone checking that and ran into those guys a day or two before? And now I realized we had a whole different type of wildlife crime enemy. These guys were major public safety threats. They showed tactical awareness, an assault weapon, pistols, did not belong there. And I knew it wasn't going to be a peaceful encounter if and when we were to contact them. And so that was my shock of seeing one, long-windedly, to answer your question. But for the public that run across these, and from your experience, and I can't tell you how many people in our world of agriculture or cattle ranching, or that actually ride horses or work stock, run across these, because it's not people on the paved trails in the parks that are hovering on the fringes of, say, the Silicon Valley. It's the hunters, the anglers, the equestrian, the recreationalists that want to get off the beaten path, right? Mm-hmm. They want to get down to public land areas where they can immerse in a really remote trail, maybe not see another soul for, God willing, 5-10 miles. And there's places like that in California. Well, the cartel like those places because maybe they're not going to get detected. They're going to go to the water we're seeking for recreation to thrive off of, and they're going to go steal that water. They're going to pollute and poison that water with the most dangerous, nerve agent-ridden, EPA-banned, felony to possess in America chemicals that they have to import from Tijuana to do this. So to think that when you think of cartels, you think, oh yeah, all the other stuff that's horrible, and it is. And this is polycriminality. Our niche at that time was the cartel cannabis problem because of the environmental impacts, the destruction of waterways, the poisoning of wildlife, and the public safety crimes. But we want to remember, think polycriminality is a definition. The same Sinaloa gunman I was going up against, and my team still does, and everything we were seeing in the grow sites, that same organization has a different boss that's running fentanyl distribution. And another one's running human trafficking, and they're interlacing both of them, super methamphetamine, gun running. They're doing everything they can to make a lot of money at the expense of Americans and our children, and eroding us within and making billions of black market dollars off of it. And basically, we as public and our wildlife and waterways and wildlands are the victims. And these grows aren't uncommon anymore, as you know, but seeing it, if you've never seen it before, is really an eye-opener. And it's really scary. And it's one of those things like when I do multiple, some of the pictures you see in the book, those are taken from longer PowerPoints I do, and I've been doing for years, when I was operational, 30% of my job of forming up the tactical unit as a lieutenant and the team leader was 30% was outreach, presenting these pictures of the horrific wildlife damage, the guns we were seizing, the punji pits, Vietnam area punji pits on like trails in Whiskeytown National Park, of all places in America, in California, and educating legislatures before we regulated cannabis under Prop 64 and talking to grower groups. You know, we're going to regulate, guys, but look what's going on right under the nose of you guys trying to do it right. And getting that message out so people, if they do run across it, and they still are, just to get out safely, report it, and not go any further than when they see the first sign of that grow. And the book pictures help with that, of identifying what you might run across. Because again, these EPA banned poisons, the carbofuran, the metaphos, the Q-furan, all those trade names. And as you know, we've got some good color pictures of what these things look like, not only in their containers when they're sealed, but when they're broken open and when they're diluted with water and they look like a pink energy drink or Pepto-Bismol or something like that. They're anything but that. These things are nasty. 2 tablespoons of carbofuran dumped in that creek. And we know that carbofuran was in that creek even before they diverted it, because they were using all those poisons. We had no idea about them at that time, and fortunately didn't sustain any toxicity then and beyond. But 2 tablespoons of that kill every fish, every aquatic, everything that's living off of that water for miles. And that's not an exaggeration. And that stuff is being used all over grows today, even the hoop houses up where you're from. Siskiyou County is one example, and the work I've done with Jeremiah LaRue, that awesome sheriff up there, and Mendo sheriff, and Humboldt sheriff. They're wired right to what's going on, and we're really focusing on these poisons that are not only started with the Mexican cartels way back when, but now the Chinese growers that have their own from mainland China that are just as potent, if not worse. So these are the things people need to be aware of, and why we called the second book Hidden War, because it truly is a hidden war that, like you said perfectly, my friend, is not everybody knows about this, and they still don't. And after 3 years of wild, we showed us in grows doing this out of helicopters with phenomenal canine Phoebe apprehending armed growers, the super dog, as you know from reading the book, before she passed. Man, God bless her. What a canine, what a partner. But and even after all these years and all the press, all the documentaries, all the reality TV, the book, doing these podcasts, I still get all the time, oh my God, I just heard you on this particular podcast. I had no idea, Lieutenant, this is going on in Indiana. My guys are running across it, blah, 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 blah. How do we start? We're going to need a team because we're not equipped to deal with this safely. And now they found our state. So the more attention we bring to it, man, the better. And I'm very grateful to talk with you today about it, because I do know one thing after operational retirement. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely miss pushing a carbine with my guys and working with the dogs, and knowing that every grower we take out of circulation, we probably saved not only a lot of water and wildlife, but we saved some human lives with the poisoning and the destruction they were going to do. But honestly, the old saying sticks true sometimes. The pen is mightier than the sword. And when I was operational, when these book chapters were taking place, I couldn't talk about it publicly. We were gag ordered from working with press crews and doing documentary crews. Once regulations started on Prop 64 in 2016, I was told, you're not going to lead the press charge anymore. And we had from Fox to CNN to Dan Rather to every other news channel in the middle. We had Rick Stewart, a very good friend of mine, Air Force veteran, who hosted the Patriot Profiles Life of Duty documentary series on NRA television for 11 years, award-winning outdoor channel. We did 2 documentaries with him while operational before we had the Met team in 2008 or 9. And that one's called Reclamation, the Battle for Terra Firma, on the environmental impacts. And then we had one specifically highlighting our Met unit in 2016 called War in the Woods, aptly. And as soon as that happened and all those things were rolling out to get massive exposure to the issue, with California being a template for what's going on in all the states and how we can better prepare, that's when we were no longer working with the press directly. And that was one of those things where I said, okay, 2 more years. 2 more years. And that's one of the reasons I retired. Well, I was maxed out. I was 50 years old. I had a max retirement, and it couldn't have been a better time to go to promote this problem nationally without any gag orders, and really, honor and represent all the game wardens in the cannabis enforcement program in California. And Keely, there's over 100 now. I mean, there's the tactical unit of Met, and then there's all these private land teams that strictly are serving search warrant after search warrant on these unregulated grows that are in rural areas, but they're not deep in the woods. You can drive to them because with regulation, these guys don't have to hide anymore because they're not really going to get in that much trouble. So why go 8 miles into Sequoia National Park, let's say? So I know it's a lot, but you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir on that, but for your listeners, it's really great for them to have a little bit of awareness of where it started, and what California has become for the rest of the nation.
Absolutely.
I've always said California is the weed state of not only the country, but I think of the world, because we're one of only six true Mediterranean climates on the globe. And you can grow great outdoor cannabis from February almost to Christmas in some parts of the state. And just like fine wine in the Napa Valley, we are known for quality cannabis, and the cartel border us right to the south. Obviously, we border Mexico on the San Diego County side, and boom. So that's why they picked us. And I think we had every opportunity to regulate a little much more effectively to continue to de-incentivize the cartels and try to bring the legitimate industry into the picture to do it right under regulation. We were never intending to demonize cannabis. We're non-political as an agency. We just were demonizing environmental crime and public safety threats to our people in the outdoors. And unfortunately, it's gone the other way, as you know.
We were just talking before we started recording about this projected reintroduction of grizzlies, which I would love to get into with you another time. We could talk about grizzlies and wolves all day. But, you know, the people who are pushing that legislation, the main one is a woman from LA who I don't think has ever been to any of these areas we're talking about. So people who just don't have any familiarity, right? They're the ones pushing this reform, these ideologies, and they're the ones also who just don't seem to prioritize and understand the blight that this, you know, these DTO operations are creating on our public land. And I mean, anybody who lives in rural areas is familiar. I remember, you know, I was 16 years old after a Friday night football game. I went packing with my dad up in the mountains with our horses. You know, we're on a hunting trip with him and his buddies, and I was watching the horses. And one of the horses got out one day, so I'm alone trying to track this horse down in the middle of nowhere. And you know, we spending a few days up there. And when we all got back to the campsite that night together, the guys told me they had stumbled into exactly like you're describing, one of those gigantic, very well-organized grow operations. So you know it's most likely a cartel or a DTO grow site. And I just thought, you know, as I'm older now looking back, I'm a 16-year-old kid running around the mountains looking for my horse. This is my backyard. These are my home mountains. This is the kind of thing that people are coming across everywhere in Northern California. And like you say, it's killing wildlife. It's killing our beautiful, pristine national forests, our waterways. I mean, it is just truly horrific. I've had friends turned around at gunpoint in our public land, our, you know, the jewel of our country, our birthright is these public lands that we all get to enjoy as Americans. And this is this terrible intrusion that's happening. So I can't thank you enough for what you've done to bring attention to this issue and to solve this issue as a game warden. I want to take a quick step back. Coming from ranch country, game wardens sometimes they're not everybody's favorite person.
Oh, yeah. I know. Yeah.
But reading your book, you point out, you have this chapter where you talk about the obstacles that game wardens face. You are one of the most endangered forms of law enforcement. You guys are, you know, you're undermanned. You have one of the most dangerous jobs. You're usually alone in these vast wilderness areas. It really made me realize what you guys are up against. Can you just talk really high level about what it means to be a game warden, some of the challenges that you faced even before you got into Met? Can you talk a little bit about your career choice?
Absolutely. Great question. And it's going to be kind of two-pronged because you hit on something. Relationships with cattle ranches, especially private lands and game wardens, are always positive. And I want to dive into that because that is pivotally important of how that goes and why that goes. So I'll start by saying game wardens the uniqueness is that our focus as statewide peace officers and also federally deputized at the same time with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So game wardens in California and most progressive states they're cops for everything. They go through a police academy that is post-approved. The same thing with California Highway Patrol go through. We go through all of the same stuff to certify basic peace officer standards and training to do anything we need to do. business and professions code, health and safety code, penal code. I mean, we'll pull over drunk drivers if we have to and handle that until the chippies are there to help us. And we're part of the same state agency, local police, the sheriffs, federal agents. But the uniqueness of the game wardens is there's another 7 to 8 weeks, almost 2 full months of training on top of the peace officer standards training post academy that every law enforcement officer goes under. That's strictly wildlife law enforcement specific, wildlife ID, wildlife forensics. We have an exotic weapons class that I used to teach when I was at the academy teaching multiple things, where we're going to expose these cadets to like 600 to 1,000 different firearms in 2 days. They're going to see guns that you haven't even seen in a war movie on TV. They're going to see traditional German guns. They're going to see assault guns. They're going to see muzzle loaders. They're going to see multiple handguns. Because one thing game wardens face more than I think any other law enforcement usually faces, a diversity of weapons, because everybody, 90% of everybody we contact is going to have a gun. The flip side of it is, and to my, thin blue line brothers and sisters in law enforcement in traditional law enforcement jobs, sheriff, police, etc., when they're experiencing guns on contacts, it's not usually a good thing. Domestic violence, felony car stop, a stolen vehicle, whatever. Most of the people, thankfully, that we encounter with weapons are our allies. They're force multipliers. They're conservationists. They're cattle ranchers. They're people that grew up under the conservation ethic. They've been using firearms safely and ethically since, like me, 9 years old when I got my hunter safety license and harvested my first waterfowl, a cinnamon teal with dad. Made him proud. We ate it for dinner.
Awesome.
Like you growing up, with dad and your family, the same thing. That's the difference with game wardens from the standpoint of focus. And then the job diversity is just crazy. The uniqueness is we don't go to a squad. We don't report into, a substation. We have our own vehicles. They're issued to us. They go home. We have a computer. We have a phone, everything to have our own office from home because we have to be immersed in the district we live in. And really, I think what makes the most effective game warden, especially in cattle country, especially in rural country, is a community-oriented police model that mainline departments have been trying to experiment with for decades now. It's something I even studied in criminal justice in my graduate work of what a community-oriented police officer is so much more proactive in stopping crime by immersing in those relationships, nipping in the bud in the problem areas, rather than just going call and triaging bad things, right? Well, a game warden, I think, is the ultimate community-oriented police officer because you literally have to know everybody. If you haven't met all your ranchers behind locked gates, then go to that gate and wait for somebody to come by and introduce yourself. Know your wildlife rehabilitation people, know all your law enforcement agencies, know all your environmental, your code enforcement people. But it's really unique. You don't have a set schedule. You have a couple set days off that totally fluctuate. And if you're motivated, I got to get out there. And that's one of the things. It's such a fun job because a lot of us come from backgrounds like you and me. And when I made it back home to the Gilroy position, I was actually a working game warden in areas I grew up in, seeing friends I went to high school with, seeing people that went to high school with my brothers and my sisters. And just my long-winded point is you're immersing in the community. And if you happen to make it back home and want to work in your home area, I think you're already a leg up because you're not going to have this fear of the unknown of these cattle ranchers that might be a little rough around the edges. Maybe they don't welcome you. Just jump in their fence because there could be a wildlife violation out there. And you're doing everything from hunting and fishing enforcement to environmental crime, massive water pollution cases on epic scales, offshore and inland. I did a lot of threatened endangered species cases in Riverside County, like a year out of the academy. The EPA came and jointly prosecuted them with us. And I had U.S. attorneys and amazing attorneys that I was working with our local prosecutor in Riverside County. And it was like learning, drinking through a fire hose of a learning curve, but it was incredible, and like you, I'm always trying to get better. I'm always trying to learn something I don't know about or get more immersed in something I'm passionate about. And then, kind of fail forward from any mistakes we're making. And that's the way to do it, is to have that diversity so you never get bored. And most game wardens, and I look at even the newer generation with the challenges the younger game wardens are up against now, wildlife trafficking, the undercover unit, cannabis enforcement, the Delta Bay Enforcement Program, that specialized team. California has more specialized stuff and more diversity going on. definitely tight for any particular state. I think for that, there's no way I think if you're doing a good job as a game warden in California, you're ever going to really be bored because you can't really get enough done.
Sure.
And that relationship makes or breaks your reputation and makes or breaks your effectiveness as a game warden. If your local resident experts, and I'm going to go to, really for where I live and where I grew up and where you live and grew up, is I look at the cattle ranchers and I look at the farmers and I look at agriculture, and people think, okay, come on. You grew up in the Silicon Valley, man. You went to San Jose State. You don't have any cattle ranching going on around there. I go,
Wrong.
where I was wrong. You have, the president of Santa Clara Cattlemen's Association, my good friend Justin Fields from the Fields Family Cattle Company, is a stone's throw above the Silicon Valley, right? And we have some of the best cattle ranches going on in this part of the state still. We have that diversity all over California. But if you don't make good relationships with those folks, and I had a little bit of a leg up because I was from here, but there were still people I didn't know. There were some people I didn't interact with as a civilian youngster. I was 16, 17, 18 on a handful of family ranches that I was friends with. But then I came back as a warden. I realized, oh my gosh, I got to get to know this guy and this couple. And I've never worked with these people. And be a force multiplier. One thing I always did, and I always tell young cadets, I said, look, you can be assertive, you can be very proficient, you can be very confident and make the best cases by being as nice as possible until it's time not to be nice. Don't ever go in heavy-handed. One thing I attribute most every game warden I've ever trained or ever gotten to train under, my mentors, my heroes, or worked around with squad members, some of the best communicators, some of the most humble people that you absolutely de-escalate any type of what's this guy really doing. And and you have the problem if you get a little overzealous, because under open fields doctrine, as you're probably aware of, game wardens have search and seizure authority that exceeds every other law enforcement entity pretty much on the planet, especially in the US, because wildlife belong to everybody, even on private land. So if we have reasonable suspicion they're being poached, we don't need a warrant to go across a gate or go across a fence and investigate on a private ranch or on a private rural track. And if you're a private landowner and you're a rancher and you don't know this young game warden, you don't have no idea who this person is. Or in certain cases, when there's poaching going on, you have something to hide. Now the game warden becomes the enemy. And now those relationships, like how do we work most effectively with open fields and the incredible privilege that wardens have to be able to do that? Well, what you do is you always consider it a privilege, not a right. In some states right now are fighting to take that away from game wardens. Governors in rural states are pushing to eliminate open fields, which would literally cripple game wardens' effectiveness, because anybody behind a locked gate could obviously exponentially have a lot easier time getting away with real wildlife crimes like a deer baiting operation. And I had a ton of those, or another big game thing going on, or an illegal hunt, or, introducing species where they shouldn't be, various things like that, Keely. So I say, guys, first make yourself known first before you start jumping gates. Okay. Unless it's a dirty operator and you're going to compromise the case. And usually you're going to know right away where that is. But it's just a matter of being grateful, immersing in your community. And if you have a respect and a love for, I think, what are icons of conservation right now, and that is the cattle industry, as much as it's demonized for not being truly conservation oriented, that's a misnomer, because cattle ranches, as you know, that do it by the numbers, are wonderful for wildlife balance. In fact, they're necessary for wildlife balance. And I could quote all kinds of different things to show that. But we need those folks, because who knows the backcountry better than people that ride a horse for a living and work on the edge of public land, but work on these massive cattle ranches and see just about every imaginable wildlife issue that you could imagine. Mountain lion depredation, poaching, elk poaching, tule elk, the issue that I'm working so hard to promote and protect and put on conservation programs for our tule elk, that exist only in your and my home state. And 5,700 animals. Is the smallest elk species in North America, endemic to California, nowhere else on the globe. And they literally are thriving where I was this morning, working coyote patrol, predator control operations, because they've taken a couple elk calves this year already on a great herd of elk, about 10 air miles from where we're having this conversation right now. And people are like, what? There's endangered elk that in California, and what's going on with that? I go, well, where are most of those elk? They're not on public land. They're on cattle ranches. Right. And what are these cattlemen and cattlewomen doing? They're looking after them indirectly and even directly when they're gathering for branding, when they're moving cattle for selective grazing and doing it by the numbers, and they're keeping that habitat perfect. And I can tell you from the particular ranch I'm on a lot right now, and I won't put locations out for obvious reasons, but I've never seen a more balanced approach where the herd is up. In the 5 years I've been working with my close friends on this ranch and similar ranches, the herd is completely up because we've lowered the number of coyotes. They're still thriving. We know there's a couple lions cruising through the area, mountain lions. There's no harm, no foul with them. The cattle are thriving. Yeah, we do lose calves occasionally. We keep the pressure on the predators. We never want to wipe out those great predators. They're magnificent. They need to be there. They just don't need to be there in overpopulation, as you know. Right. And these elk are booming. The bull count, the herd bull that just started a pre-rut, I was filming 2 days ago, the big daddy out of 7 bulls on the ranch that has claimed himself, he's identified as the herd bull, and he's already starting to herd his cows and those calves that are now of size that the predators aren't so threatening to him. And that's because they are on a great cattle ranch, and they would be poached. They would be, on a barbecue somewhere. They would be sold. Any other imagining thing if it was just a random piece of property or an edge of a public land that never got patrolled, because these things are literally off highway-like roads that people can and sometimes do poach. And if I didn't have, my heroes, my cattle ranching, close family friends always out there when I can't be, those elk would suffer, to put it mildly. So that's what being a game warden is. Being a game warden is immersing and not only doing it for the job and doing good at your job because it's your duty, but doing it because you feel it in your heart and you're impassioned for protecting what we all hold near and dear. And that's obviously keeping our wildlife, wildlands, and waterways on private or public land in the whole state of California and the whole United States of America as viable and healthy for as many generations to come. And that doesn't mean we just go, okay, that's elk habitat, or that's grizzly bear habitat, or that's gray wolf habitat now. So humans, leave them alone. That's theirs now. We're going to protect them. That's not what we're supposed to do. This is, we're going to coexist. And we know we're obviously the dominant predator. There's a lot of us on the planet, and we've got a lot of issues with the bad footprint we leave as humans. So we have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to keep the balance. So it's really, really up to us to make it work. And it's through good game laws and through conservation, which all of us on the game warden front love to do.
Yeah, so well said. I have a close family friend who's a game warden, which helped me appreciate what you guys do, the varied nature of your job. So I just wanted to have young listeners who, I think one of the purposes of UNWON that I've always pushed is just getting more kids to know about jobs like this that are available to them and careers that are a little off the beaten track if they don't feel like they are someone who wants to grow up and work in an office. There's so much out there. There's so much opportunity out there. The internet is always telling you that the wilderness is closed and there aren't exciting jobs for young guys and girls who feel a different calling, and that's just not true. There's so much opportunity, and I think being a game warden is one of those opportunities to, like you're saying, not only protect nature and be out in nature every day for your job, but get involved in the community and serve that community. So thank you for taking a quick detour to talk about that. I felt like it was important given my audience.
No, it's huge, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And on the job front, California, both from pay levels for a starting game warden to actually make a living as a game warden, in, say, the Silicon Valley, where I grew up, that unless I lived here, that was a tough thing. But now game wardens have got so much more diverse, and resources have been generated with budgets and things like the wildlife trafficking mandate that the Obama administration actually happily, and I'm grateful, pushed that for every state. You got to focus on wildlife trafficking. I mean, it's the number $4 crime in the billions, worldwide, on top of drugs and trafficking and everything else. And so when things like that started and the Met team got formed and our undercover unit that strictly does deep cover stuff for, intentional poachers, wildlife sales, conspiracy stuff. I don't think there's a better job if you really love the outdoors and you love wildlife. If you're wired to do a law enforcement job in general, it's amazing. And one thing I've done a lot since, obviously I've been able to speak a lot, and I appreciate everything again we're doing today and you having me on, is it gives some young adults and maybe not so young adults. I mean, I've had people change careers at 45, 50 years old and say, okay, I can go till I'm 65. I always wanted to be a game warden. I'm in good shape. I was a successful business owner. One of our previous chiefs of patrols was that guy, and then jumped into law enforcement at 45. And I'm training him in the academy. And he just came from, a very successful chain of auto parts stores. So that happens a lot. And I mentor a lot of new people getting into the job, what to prepare for, because the one thing that's hard to find in the new generation, and I know you can resonate with this, especially in the digital generation, of youth that come from city environments don't spend a lot of time really off the beaten path. Yeah, maybe they go to a fishing lake that's planted. Maybe they go on to Yosemite and do a beat down trail, but don't really immerse in the woods and really live off the land or hunt or fish, haven't had any experience with firearms. And now all of a sudden they want to be a game warden because it's a sexy profession if you like the outdoors. A lot of autonomy, right? You're on your own. You're a self-starter. You're not going to see your supervisor every day. You're going to start at home and end at home. So you make or break, your career on your motivation. No one's holding your hand. Some of our youth today can't do that. They can't do an unstructured reality, and then they might be overly intimidated by encountering weapons all the time, right? Or getting far away from that truck on a hike by themselves or maybe with one other partner, and they're down in a canyon now, and heaven forbid they encounter a cartel grower, but just a fisherman or a hunter that's armed in an area that you're remote. If you're not comfortable in dealing with people and kind of having your skill sets ready for anything can go wrong, if this is the 1%er that's going to go violent, maybe it's a felon on the run, a Claude Dallas type scenario. Game wardens encounter more guns and are prone statistically to more murderous violence than any other law enforcement officer because of the situation we're in. And bad people that don't want to be on the grid, parolees, people with warrants, people that are hiding from the law for really evil crimes, they're going to go to the woods to hide. They don't want to be in the city where they could be identified or picked up. Yeah. And today, right now, recruiting the right people. But one thing with the ability to do outreach and podcasts in the book is, and especially when you see this visually in documentaries and Wild Justice, and your documentary is amazing, by the way. And I know we met over you sending that to me, and the depth and the intensity grabs you, and it tells a story that is so secret. And it's such a surface story for everything we know that's going on with other missing, murdered folks up in your Emerald Triangle where you're from. More and more of that on the game warden front, and to see other game warden reality shows like Northwoods Law, now the Game Warden channel brought a bunch onto YouTube to keep that going. That's what really hooks our youth, is something really visual, really exciting, and go, oh, wow, I can't stop thinking about that. Now I want to know more. And those are the calls I get or the emails I get. And, there's a lot of good game wardens now that have jumped in the profession inside and outside of California since I've been quote unquote retired for 8 years, since that all dropped. And that's really what it is, right? For you and I to pay it forward on any level we can, And when it comes to helping teams in other states handle the cartel thing, I'm like, guys, we were so ill-equipped. We were doing this ad hoc with other agencies, and it took a long time to get the green light and the blessing for Mike Carrion, my mentor and the chief of our department at the time, to say, okay, I know what happens. We've had 6 gunfights now. One of you was almost killed. You guys have dodged, barely made it out of the other ones. Pick the right people. There's going to be political fallout on this because there's a lot of good game wardens that are good at the Met stuff, and they're going to be leaving their districts, and there's going to be internal politics and captains and chiefs that are really not into this. And I'll take that heat. Go prove yourself. We did. And here we are, and everything's getting done. We probably could double the amount of game wardens in California if I had my ways, because you steal from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, and it's hard to get enough patrol wardens, enough marine-focused wardens, enough cannabis wardens. but that's why we're called the thin green line, right? And that thin green line is very tenuous. And with that, you and me, even outside of being operational game wardens, myself included, we're part of that important thin green line because of what we do on the outreach education front and what you're doing right now with everything you do, even outside of this interview. I'm incredibly grateful, and anything I can do to help your efforts, man, I'm just amazed with what you're pulling off. Especially being a new mom and staying out there and keeping the fight. So we need more of us like you, Keely, as part of the thin green line that weren't game wardens, and maybe they weren't biologists, so maybe they weren't attached to the conservation wildlife law enforcement side. But the thin green line now, just like Joe Rogan said when I got to know Joe and that friendship developed, he said, well, I'm not a game warden, but I'm part of this thin green line. I had no idea. This is bullshit. We need to shut this down. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take massive reach and get those laws changed in such a way that if you're going to regulate cannabis in the state, don't follow California's model. Don't make outdoor trespass growing a misdemeanor from a felony and tell the cartel, oh yeah, you're going to lose your plants. If there's no felony there, you're not going to get prosecuted. But you know, you can go one of your 20 other grows, keep making your hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, and laugh at us, and we'll just play whack-a-mole. And sadly, that's what we've done in California. Most states have followed that. And until we reform the way we regulate cannabis, we're going to continue to drive legitimate growers out of the business because the black market is a 4-5 to 1 ratio. For every million pounds or $1 million of legal marijuana made in the legal market, it's 10 times that on the black market. And I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. Here we are, a decade and some change from Prop 64. So anyway, a lot there. And I know I tangent a little bit, so my apologies, but
No,
you know what
not
I'm saying
at all.
there.
It's all so important to cover. You talk about this black market that's basically been emboldened by legalization. I think consumers should know about it. The LA Times and Weed Week bought legal products off dispensary shelves and had them tested. 25 of 42 came back over state or federal pesticide safety limits. A follow-up found more than half of legal smoking products in California contained chemicals that no one is monitoring. And Siskiyou County investigators have tracked illegally grown poison weeds straight into licensed dispensaries in California and Oregon. So kids are ingesting this horrific stuff that you're finding in the woods that you're talking about that kill fish and kill wildlife. They're ingesting that in cannabis products sold even in legal dispensaries. I think it's so important to talk about that. There's trafficked workers spraying this with no protection. There's game wardens running into this, hunters running into this, watershed. It impacts people all downstream. I mean, I had a sheriff in Mendocino County, Matt Kendall. He calls it blood cannabis. He said we need to have the same understanding of cannabis on our legal shelves that we got from that Leonardo DiCaprio movie in the 90s about diamonds. You know, this is where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think I've never heard that analogy from Matt, but I really, really admire and respect what he's doing up there and calling it a spade. Jeremiah LaRue doing the same thing, you know, up in Siskiyou County. I mean, I think this is such a public safety, environmental, and health evil that from seed to basically sale or trafficking or distribution, it's just an erosion of the American public from within that our enemies don't have any problem with, you know? And again, is that the goal of the cartel? Maybe, maybe not. But at the same time, we need to remember that this is a black market. They know there's a lot of freedoms in America, so they can get away with a lot more than they can anywhere else. I mean, look at the China development now and the Chinese triads that are now embedded all over America. And
can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely.
But you know, I even think since I filmed that documentary you mentioned, it seems that things have shifted. We talked a little bit about Chinese cartels in that documentary, but tell me about what you're seeing. Where has the black market, cannabis black market, moved in the United States? It's not just a California problem anymore. How have things shifted in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's been wild. And I remember, so I retired operationally in December 2018, and not long after 2016 Prop 64 enacted, and it watered that statute of illegal growing over 6 plants, private or public land, whatever, to a misdemeanor. That's when we started to see the Asian black markets, Northern California, and this was Siskiyou County specifically in Shasta County. And as Jeremiah LaRue will tell you, it becomes a massive problem because when you have the Chinese groups coming from Oklahoma and Minnesota, and they're moving to Northern California, why? Well, because it's a misdemeanor, because it's a good growing climate, because they have very little enforcement. In the case of Siskiyou County, Jeremiah has so few deputies and it's so massive and so remote with, Mount Shasta and then the Oregon border. He can't respond to all that. So they moved up north and started there. Now in your old county, it's still a big problem. Shasta as well. But Siskiyou is the template. I use it as the example of what goes wrong in rural America. And we didn't know. I thought, okay, these are the Hmong and the Chinese groups that are American citizens, but perhaps seeing a black market opportunity that's just lucrative. It went way beyond that. And it started to escalate more and more. And then we start to find out this is going on in Oklahoma. And then talking with Tucker Carlson, specifically on this directly, and finding out that he has a whole documentary from, the Maine Wire put together that on what happened in his home state of Maine. The same triads did the same thing because Maine regulated like we did. And pretty soon it's Michigan and doing work with those guys in Oklahoma and all those northeastern states I've done some work with. But all the other states that regulate the way we do, the Chinese organized crime groups see that as a massive moneymaker. And then the big debate became, well, wait a minute, this is weird. We don't know the Mexican cartel to get along with anybody and let somebody cut in on their business, especially in Northern California, Emerald Triangle, where you're at, ground zero, essentially. Why are they doing that? And well, I find out from my friends at the DEA at the highest level, right before I was asked to testify in the first congressional hearing, which was protect our border, save our parks. And the goal of that congressional hearing basically in the Resources Committee in the U.S. House was, John, tell us some stories about something beyond what's going on at the border with cartels. We get the border issue. We're beating it into the ground. We know we got to tighten up the border. But you're in the Silicon Valley. You're all over Northern California. Now you're working in these other states. And this cartel thing is widespread. It's everywhere. Tell us why, tell us how. So, and I get all the information about the Chinese dumped on me by friends in the DA right before I go to testify in Congress. And I said, can I use this in testimony? They're like, absolutely. And it was 7 or 8 of their own poisons and, insecticides and rodenticides and all kinds of different poisons that are just like carbofuran that the Mexicans use, with, Chinese riding from the homeland over here to use in their grow sites. And I said, why are these guys working hand in hand with the cartels? How are they getting along? And the Chinese and Mexican cartels basically, within the last 8 years, especially Keeley, have said, okay, we want to work together, and here's why. The Chinese group said, we really want to take a lot of the weed trade because it's a cash market. It's not federally insured. It's not federally regulated. And we want to amass as much cash off the grid that's untraceable as we can. And in exchange, you guys, Sinaloa, let's say, or Jalisco, whoever's doing the meth and the fentanyl and the weed, what we'll do is we'll launder your money. We know right now, Sinaloa cartel in general, Keeley, or any cartel group out of Mexico is paying a 6% fee on every black market dollar they have to launder to legitimize. Now, Chinese say, we will launder your money for 5%. And if this works, we'll give you even more of a discount. And you can invest that money in Chinese business institutions here in America, overseas. So it was working so good. And the Mexican cartels are like, we don't want to get totally out of the weed trade, but we're really into fentanyl now because 1 million fentanyl pills goes for so much more money and we can make it and move it so much easier. We get human trafficking into that. And that's not a one and done, moneymaker. We can traffic a person and we can just keep using them up, eroding them, the immorality, the inhumanity of it. But we're going to make a ton of money off this one person that we've trafficked for whatever, whether it's in the horrific, dirtiest end, most evil, ungodly way, child sex, all the way up to just being an indentured worker inside a cannabis grow, say in Mendo County or Siskiyou County. So it was working so good for those guys. Right now, the Mexican cartels are paying $0 to the Chinese to launder their money and also get precursor chemicals from the Chinese, either for free or significantly discounted, to make their P2P, which is the super meth, and also fentanyl and other advanced derivatives of fentanyl. So these two entities are making B as in billions of black market dollars and killing. Now, the numbers have gone down of the fentanyl deaths, largely because of what the latest administration has done to really tighten up border trafficking of fentanyl. But enough of it's coming in from the northern border now. 70 to 100,000 deaths of Americans per year from fentanyl and drug overdoses, and you're killing people from preteen all the way up to that 45 age demographic. So what are our enemies of the state doing by doing this? They're making a ton of money in middle America. They're standing up their not rival cartel, their partner in crime, and they're killing off basically that fighting force or that new generation that are going to be our leaders in America and be around to keep this country going long after you and I are gone. So it goes so far beyond money. It goes so far beyond just crime and opportunistic. It's as evil as it gets. And being an absolutely patriotic American like you and loving this nation, no matter how messed up we are in so many levels, we're still the best place with the best opportunities. And I've been all over the world. I mean, I've hunted, I've explored, I've raced in Baja, I run a Baja racing team, and we support an orphanage down there. Beautiful people, but I wouldn't live in Baja permanently after living in this with the blessings we have here. So when I started to see that, I said, okay, this is going beyond just cannabis in Northern California and Mexican cartels getting along with the Chinese. This is a conspired collusion to erode America within. And my thing was, and the way it was explained to me is, why do the Chinese want so much black market dollars? And the idea is they want to amass all this cash, convert it into their currency in the goal of changing the world currency standard to Chinese and having that much more money to do it with this off book, off grid. And I don't know no, I'm not kidding. I don't know the financial breakdown of that, but Bill Bodner,
So
who's a friend of mine.
It's that deep. Wow.
It's that deep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one thing that's good about the new administration that I'm grateful for is that we've finally taken this as an enemy of the state, and the FTO definition that Trump put out with that mandate, right? That executive order, foreign terrorist organization. And he named Sinaloa, he named Jalisco New Generation, MS-13, Tren de la Agua down in Venezuela, all of those. The big players, which opens up the door to how we can go after them. I mean, there were domestic law enforcement limits we just couldn't do, especially when I was at the peak of operations with our Met unit and our Delta Sniper unit. That was right when the sanctuary state doctrine was coming down from both Brown and then Governor Newsom, that we're sanctuary state, we're not going to talk about cartels. And we were getting orders from our administration, and they didn't want to tell us this. Our own bosses were saying, hey, don't work with ICE, don't share information. You go into a grow, you take out armed growers that are deportable felons, they're not citizens. You cannot share that information. I went, what? We just got in a gunfight with this guy. He's not a fatal one. In one of the book chapters, the last chapter, that gunfight on Sierra Azul on the backside, part of that grow was on a children's science camp, right? Fortunately, the kids weren't there when this was going down. And I'm told by my captain while we're on admin leave from our, 6 officer involved shooting, this one while we have our Met team operational, and it went really smoothly for us as officers that day, thankfully, with 3 good dogs, that it wasn't worse because there were a lot of guns and a lot of bad guys there, and we got one of them. That no, that's it. The discipline's going to happen if any communication is with ICE to deal with this guy when he gets out of the hospital. I went, wait a minute. We're federally deputized through U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and by policy, we are mandated to help any of our federal partners. Are we changing our policy in writing? Nope. But this is just coming down. There's nothing in writing, and I can't believe I have to tell you this. And that came from my captain when I was on leave in Montana, kind of decompressing from that incident. And that was 2017. And I went, okay, well, here we are. Well, my point of telling this political story is that now under the FTO designation, states can't stop that. ICE is going to do, and we've seen that controversy in California, right, already, and the pushback on both sides. But it's pretty black and white, I think, to most people, even the naysayers, in having ICE run around California and do legitimate or questionable inspections, however it's defined. And I'm not making any judgment either way. I think when you're dealing with armed gunmen that are deportable felons from a criminal organization that's highly trained in our woods or in our private lands on hoop houses, I don't think anybody would disagree with a reasonable standard that I shouldn't be enforcing that and getting them out of circulation and out of the country and stopping the problem, stopping the death, stopping the poisoning. So
Right.
that's what's been great about the new administration. That's been great about being able to share some of my experiences of what happens when you deny the presence of cartels because you're a sanctuary state and you have another agenda, and health and human safety don't even factor into it. Then the evil of politics weaves in, and you've talked about this in other situations with other people, and I know we're like-minded here. Just keep it about Americans, keep it about as much safety for our children, and get the criminality out. And I don't care where you swing politically. I don't care what your demographic is. But as an American, let's just team up on this. And the one thing I can say for sure is the one thing about cartel grow poisons and the evil and the decimation they do, Keely, that unifies everybody. I mean, I'll take this. I was the first law enforcement officer to go into a California Growers Association sponsored meeting of growers to talk about the new law. And I'm on a panel. Hezekiah Allen at the time was the head of the California Growers Association, an outlaw, but a notoriously effective grower, and became legal up in the Emerald Triangle. And I'm with all these cannabis regulator people and growers, and there's like 600 growers that were outlaws before. And I'm there with my pup. I got my canine, and I'm going to do a PowerPoint. I'm on the panel, and I'm in my gear, and they're like, "What's he doing here? This is blasphemy. He's going to follow our license plates home, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Whoa, time out, guys. No. That's done. We just passed Prop 64. This is a grace period. We're going to go from handcuffs to hugs and handshakes. If you guys are truly going to do it right," and I know a lot of you do it environmentally conscious. You conserve your water. You want to not be an outlaw, but you're dealing with the cartels too. So let me show you these horrific photos of dead mountain lions, poison bears, bad weapons, poison waterways, all the nation. And right away, they were calling us the Earth Warriors. And I had the most non-conservative, I'll just put it that way, off-grid, the old hippie generation singing our praises for the Met team. And then, of course, the conservative, conservationist, cattle ranching, veteran demographic, for lack of a better word, where you and I come from, meet right in the middle. And I said, that's how we're going to get past all this BS of the divisiveness and stop the infighting and come to a common problem. I mean, I had growers, no kidding, in tears, men and women, bawling their eyes out when I told the story of our gunfight. I told the story of how this mountain lion died, and then this bear and her cub, like the picture in the book, right? That little cub in the V of the tree, 10 feet up, from her mom that's died of ingesting some 2 drops of carbofuran that the growers put in a tuna can to suck the animals in before they got to the plant. And the mother's dead, violent death. You never want to see a nerve agent poison kill an animal. I don't care if you hunt or don't hunt. That is a horrible way to see an animal die, for them especially. And then the baby's ingested the poison. She's up in the V because she's scared and dies in place, a little 50-pound cub. And I've showed that to animal rights groups. I've showed that to hunter groups. And I get the same reaction from both: outrage, horror, depression, tears. And I go, okay, now we're onto something. Now we can just agree to disagree. We are humans. We are apex predators. We are basically governing and managing our wildlife resource, and we're mandated to manage them the most effective way we can. And when this cartel evil is one of the biggest, if not the biggest destroyer of our triple W resources, then we better do a little better job. And we're sort of starting to, but we're a long ways from really solving a lot of the problems, as you know, here in California. But the one thing that's been effective, I've been able to take our mistakes in my old home state that I still love so much and just put it out to other states and say, you're going to encounter this, you're going to encounter that. Try not to make this error if you build this team. Try to sway your governor to do this. We can try, and at least the message is out there and people have more of an awareness, because largely what you and I are doing today. So people ask, man, do you ever get tired of talking about it? I go, no, not at all. And with you, it's even more personal because you get it, you've seen it, and you and I come from the Golden State, and we have roots that we really love in conservation, cattle, and all those type of different things. So I'm getting probably a little more fired up because I'm kind of preaching to a friendly choir here. But yeah, we just stay in the fight because knowledge is power, and the hidden war needs to be so unhidden, and we're just going to keep pushing it.
100%. Well, it won't surprise you to know that I have friends on all sides of this issue. Growing up in the
Me
Emerald, I
too.
have friends who are hippie growers, outlaw growers. I mean, my high school, we had teachers and coaches who were outlaw growers. It's just part of the culture there. You see all sides, you hear all sides, you hear everybody's point of view. But one thing I will say is I interviewed some friends who are outlaw growers, and some have gone legal, some are still black market, but they all agree that the cartels are a huge issue that has gotten worse since legalization. You talk about, which I thought was so interesting, you talk about these grower groups that'll come out and help you with cleanups, which I know a lot of outlaw growers, some legal, who have participated in those cleanups because they really do see the issue. That's how bad it is. It's uniting everybody, whatever side of the spectrum you are on. It has gotten so bad in our national forests. And I wanted to just quickly pull up. So this book is just bookmarked all over the place, but there's one section where you talk about,
Awesome.
it's again, like all the photos and everything. I mean, talk about an issue that impacts America. Talk about an America first issue. We're talking about war in all these other countries. This is a war happening in your backyard, in your forest, and nobody knows about it. So you talk about, okay, so page 92. For years, we've been curious why so many DTO operatives that our team apprehended were illegally in the United States from Mexico. Most came from the Central Highlands area. Why was it so easy for these criminals to get across the border and run clandestine grow operations? The boss grinned at these questions and told us the border was not even recognized by the DTOs as a dividing line between countries. They consider California part of Mexico, referring to it as Mexico Norte, Mexico North. They see the border as a minor roadblock. You talk about them shipping and smuggling containers of EPA-banned carbofuran-based poisons into the United States when they cross. These are obviously completely illegal and unavailable in the States, but these groups were just buying the product in Tijuana and running it into the U.S. with their growers. No problem. Not only that, they also cook meth. They work in the heroin and fentanyl markets. They run human trafficking operations and smuggle stolen guns and ammunition back to Mexico to fuel fights between cartel factions. Now, this was a couple years ago. I mean, this was prior to the current administration cracking down on the border. And I know in recent interviews, you've talked about how the northern border is now becoming a problem because, like you, the cartel knows how to flow like water and go wherever there's the path of least resistance and just keep on trucking. But the problems in California are still the same. You also talk about later in the book how some of these apprehended DTO suspects, you describe these gunfights that you get into, you describe very tense situation, dangerous situations that your dogs diffuse, but you're putting your life on the line. You take these guys out of the woods, you risk life and limb to do this. And then you talk about the 4 DTO suspects that did plead guilty were released on low bail amounts and failed to show up at their sentencing hearings. They're just gone back into the ether. The grow boss faced up to 10 years in prison for multiple crimes. He got basically 6 months probation, slap on the wrist. He's back out on the street. That's what we're dealing with in California. You risk your life to get these guys, and then they're just back on the street because for whatever reason, California doesn't see this as a problem, doesn't care about our rural areas. And now, can you talk about, you're seeing this in the North as well? You're seeing this in other states. This is not just a California problem. It's growing all over the country as we just ignore this issue.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head, Keely. And basically, even though the way we're politically structured in California right now, and we're kind of playing whack-a-mole, we're not stopping the problem. We're not going to stop the problem as the current law structure, as the mindset is on illegal immigration and, dealing with the sanctuary state doctrine and not even really addressing the cartel issue. But many other states are, and many other states that are about to regulate cannabis and push that misdemeanor statute to get votes because they see all the tax money they're going to get. They're looking at the money and they're not looking at anything to do with the environment or the public safety of the very state they're part of or that they're an administrator in. So, it's a little blasphemous from that standpoint, but, money and politics go hand in hand. And when you start getting in those roles of your role and in power, things start to erode. But what has happened, fortunately, I'm all for the southern border being tightened up. And when, President Trump got second elected, here we are, we tightened up the southern border, and that's been great. Hasn't completely stopped everything, but man, it significantly slowed down the action, unprecedented levels. Now, what was happening even before he did that was the northern border I'm turned on to. And what's ironic is I live in the most remote part of Northwest Montana, We're the last county, County 56. There's only 20,000 people in our county. Tons of national forests, tons of timber, Cabinet Mountain Wilderness, the Yak, and 25 to 30 miles just north of me is the Alberta border. And now that's the most vulnerable spot for the Chinese and the Mexican cartels.
Oh, you can't get away from it. That's
think
that's terrible.
Think we keep using the fill and flow the fill and flow concept, and the cartels are like water, and they're highly integrated. They're very smart. They're very structured. They're very strategic. And they said, okay, yeah, go ahead and tighten up that border. We still have tunnels. We still have the offshore panga boats, which the book goes into with some pictures. But you know what? We're learning that law enforcement's going to tighten up under the new administration. They're going to make us a priority. They're going to define us as terrorists. Well, okay, good. That's a knock. We're not going to mess. Why fight that? How about in Canada, we can go where we can get a tourist visa with no background check. We can immerse on the western coast of the Canadian province, British Columbia, everything out there. And we can start taking over farms, buying farms. We can cook fentanyl. We can import marijuana. We can do a bunch of different stuff. And we can give all the little gangs that were distributing drugs, black market, on a small scale, we can outproduce and give them more product than they've ever dreamed of having, and they can be our network. We'll bring them on board with us. And what we'll do, we'll take 5,000 miles of wild North American border, and we'll just slip it in very carefully. And we'll do fentanyl, and we'll traffic people. And that's exactly what they've been doing. And that's where the shift has happened. And Canada, from a law enforcement standpoint, you look at the Royal Canadian Mounted Police units, they're kind of a multi-jurisdictional sheriff's department that do everything, and they're awesome. But are they equipped, like of the years that we've done handling narcotics work and targeting cartels on so many levels? Not necessarily. And so Jalisco and Sinaloa are making a living up in Canada. They're pushing a ton of stuff through the northern border. And it brings me to the second congressional testimony that I presented in, and that was cartel impacts on tribal nations. And lo and behold, just this last January, the start of the year, I'm at home in Montana, and I got to give a shout out to, I don't know if you're familiar, Ironclad Productions. They have a number of podcasts. They're in Virginia Beach, a lot of veterans, a lot of special forces guys and gals that run that company. Really good group. And Change Agents, that's hosted by my friend Andy Stump, who's a California resident, Santa Cruz County, development group, SEAL Team 6 SEAL, hunter conservationist. We live 90 miles apart now. He's in Kalispell in the Flathead Valley. I'm up in the rural part of Lincoln County. Been doing those podcasts remotely, and Borderlands that Vince Vargas hosts, Katrina, Zook is out, and Kat's doing a lot of field work with that group. And they're really, I think, doing one of the best jobs of exposing all of the cartel threats beyond the Mexican southern border. Well, I get introduced to Marla Ollinger with Katarina to go interview this woman who is part of the Blackfeet tribe, tribal nation. She's a grandmother. She's a mother. Now, the Blackfeet tribal nation, 1.5 million acres, half of it's in Canada, half of it's in America, bordering my home state of Montana. The western border is Glacier Freaking National Park to the reservation. Now, imagine you got Canada and you have northern Montana and some other states bordering this reservation. And we all know tribal nations are very vulnerable to drugs of any kind. Well, Marla loses her son, who was a lineman and had a huge injury, a fall, back injury, kind of the Oxycontin horror story, if you will. Got prescribed fentanyl out of one of the reservation hospitals. Obviously not a clean fentanyl from a prescribed, maker or a pharmacy. All that cartel fentanyl is coming in, and he died. And 3 years later, only within a month or so, like I think in December, before we visited with Marla, in January of 26, her daughter, who I believe was a school teacher, died of the same problem. And finding out that since all these cartels are in Canada now, they are pushing that stuff through the reservation to distribute it everywhere, not just on the reservation, because again, tribal police are wonderful men and women. I've worked with a ton of them in Northern California when we were called in as a Met team for the Hoopa and the Yurok up in your old neck of the woods, all the way up in the Emerald Triangle. We were the first law enforcement agency to get invited in to say, hey, we're overwhelmed, guys. You know, those rivers are going bone dry. They supply our drinking water and our sacred ceremonial salmon line and all those things, right? So now I'm looking at an infiltration of America through one of the biggest reservations, if not the biggest in that part of the country, in Montana, and how easy it is to get that product across. And we literally, Andy has a helicopter now because he's sponsored by Black Rifle Coffee, and he has a franchise he's running up there in Kalispell. And Evan Hafer, the owner and founder, and Evan's good. I've done his podcast. He was unaware of this hidden war and really got into it because he and Joe Rogan got to talking about it. He went, well, what do you mean? Cartels in Northern California? And so again, right, the pipeline. And Evan put a lot of resources at it and said, take that helicopter up, take the documentary team from Ironclad, you and Andy, go fly. And we flew the northern border with a little patch of snow on it. And it's like a one track, like barely wider than a side-by-side track, literally more narrow than the 2-track power line road in the national forest behind my house for my running trail in Montana. That is the northern border. It's not fenced. It's wide open. And we were 50, maybe 100 feet off the deck as Andy's flying. And we're talking about this and seeing all the vulnerable points. And this is just our little part of Flathead Valley and Glacier and that part of the Blackfeet. The whole entire country all the way across to the eastern seaboard and then all the way across to the Washington coastline is the same. So again, fill and flow. The cartels, took a page from our book, or maybe we're taking a page from their book. They are just, hey, we're just going to redirect. We can get to Canada. We can get it in. So the emphasis now needs to be there, reinforcing that and not neglecting the impacts of the tribal nations, because not only are they so vulnerable, and the addiction and the death ratios, when you look at the percentages, are markedly higher than even the populace that are dying of fentanyl overdoses. If you look at sheer numbers, it's there, but the access, the pipeline, the capabilities, and basically the infrastructure is preying upon Native American tribes, Blackfeet as a textbook example, to get it down to middle America. My little town in Libby, Montana, is a very conservative town. It's very conservation oriented. A lot of veterans, a lot of the last, the greatest generation, the World War II fighters, my granddad included, most are gone now. There are free Narcan inhaler and fentanyl, panic kits, if you will, at the pharmacy. There's fentanyl warning signs all over the high schools, at the barber shop, in a little tiny town, because we have it everywhere. And the idea is, with Montana known as the last best place in America right now of frontier country and wide open spaces and, the conservation, the conservative kind of, patriotic lifestyle, if you will, we're impacted immensely. And that's just a template for, if it's that bad in Montana, and we know what you and I have experienced collectively and individually here in our old home state, my old home state of California, we know now that it's everywhere. So the north and south borders have to be treated the same. Cannabis needs to be regulated completely differently. That would help the environment immensely. The fentanyl demand for and education and all these different things, besides throwing a ton of law enforcement and tactical resources at it, which you're going to need anyway, it has to start at the grassroots level. And I get asked this a lot. Well, do we just throw more teams at the fight? I go, no. We got to educate our kids. One of the things I do not enough of is like school assemblies, junior high and high school, and go in and show a PowerPoint. And I said, guys, I'm not here to say, just don't do drugs. Don't try marijuana. You're a teenager. You're going to experiment. You're going to make choices, some good, some bad. I made a ton of bad ones, more bad ones than good ones. Trust me. I said, but just look at these pictures, understand where the stuff comes from. Not only tainted cannabis, but what this could kill you, but what fentanyl does. And know that if you're, not only for your own health, but if you're complicit in coming from these markets and you're incentivizing this group and contributing to their profits, somebody down the line is probably going to die. And I've had a lot of kids that were, routine cannabis users in Mendocino County and Humboldt County just go, no, I'm done. that stuff just killed that bear. No way, you know? So we got to educate, you know, it's every single community from little tiny Lincoln County to Santa Clara County where I'm sitting. And I don't know if you're in OC or North, wherever you're at, boom.
Yeah.
It's a
everywhere.
nationwide thing everywhere.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And the tribal piece is very underreported as well. I just last week wrote about a woman who was found shot. She's 31, has 4 kids, tribal woman, murdered right next to a large grow. Sheriff Kendall told me it was cartel related, he believed. So this is something that's impacting a lot of these communities. And again, these are communities that our governments should care about. These are vulnerable people. We talk about trafficking as just kind of a bullet point in the many impacts. Have you seen trafficking victims in your work? Did you come across people who were trafficked when you were eradicating these grow sites?
Absolutely. It started to happen really, really heavily where I'd see it is toward the end of my career. And then in these grow sites after, I helped out. Daily Caller did a really cool documentary called Narcofornia, and Jorge Ventura, who's you may be aware of Jorge. He's
Yes,
really a good guy. And I remember I was asked to go get interviewed for the California Insider, the Epic Times group, and they sent me Jorge's interview with them that happened like a month before mine. I had no idea what I was going into. I didn't know this group, and so we connected, and I didn't realize what he was doing with Daily Caller. So he asked me to help him out for a second documentary in Siskiyou County. And we immersed in Siskiyou and Shasta, but primarily immersing in Siskiyou and interviewing ranchers and farmers that were minutes from either not having water or out of water because they were on water rations under the state mandate. And then Asian cartels and Mexican cartels were meeting them at the gate in flak vests or in, you know, basically plate carriers and SKSs or assault weapons and saying, hey, by the way, your water might disappear. Don't make an issue of it and everything will be just fine. Not an exaggeration. So Jorge immersed. He asked me to come up and not only be interviewed for it, but to embed with Jeremiah LaRue and his Met team. That it was interesting. I'm 3 years post-retirement and I'm more on the media side like you and I do now, but I'm with my old teammates. And I'm like, guys, I'm going behind you guys on this grow raid of like 5 hoop houses for Chinese grows. And I cannot believe how much it's changed since I retired. There's 10,000 hoop houses and we're going to hit 4 today. I go, oh, it's the Wild West. Yeah. We don't go in the woods, deep into the woods these days, man. It's just whack-a-mole with this. And I remember the first grow we got to was these trafficked Asian growers that were brought out to Siskiyou County from Oklahoma and basically told, okay, you're going to get paid this much. Just stay on the narrow. And of course, they don't get paid or they get paid very little. And then they're leveraged to stay when they really don't want to stay. And pretty soon they're not getting paid at all. And in extreme cases, both in Southern California, in the desert, Southern California, Palmdale area, and then also in Northern California, actual imprisonment in RVs where you're going in at night and 15 of you are going to sleep in that RV and we're going to have a padlock on the outside door and we're going to let you out in the morning and you're going to go start growing and trimming. And that's what you're going to do. And that's the worst case of trafficking. So there's a little bit of that leverage incentive and then there's full on kidnapping and false imprisonment. So yes, we've seen it. It does go on. It continues to go on in other states. And the problem continues.
Yeah, it's just one of the many, many aspects of victimhood of this horrible thing going on in our public land. And you mentioned water, which is another piece that really pisses me off. You put it at about 5 gallons per plant per day. You multiply that across what's still in California's forest. That's over 1 billion gallons a year of stolen water. And that's only the plants that they find. Meanwhile, not to get too sidetracked, but my state is California's tearing out these hydroelectric dams, cutting water to farmers and ranchers, you know, but they could deal with the illegal grow sites happening in our public lands. I was out there interviewing a woman named Jenny, a cowgirl named Jenny up on Murder Mountain in Humboldt. And she told me she believes water is going to be the motive for a lot of murders, which to the point of, you know, you mentioned my doc from 2024. I believe that was the reason that Richard Drewry was killed, was for water by an outlaw grower out there in Bell Springs Road. And you open the book with a story about a woman named Debbie who was killed Was that over water as well, I believe you said?
It was over water, specifically the creek that she bordered with, JR. We just say as kind
Right.
of an
Who
acronym.
was who was
Who,
exonerated technically
yeah,
or whatever his charges,
uh,
whatever
yep,
happened there. Some
yeah,
nonsense that let him back out.
it's a nonsense. It's just a horrible, horrible story. And Debbie it was that David and Goliath story. And, I started the book with that chapter because it really epitomized a David and Goliath, and it's in the
Yeah.
Silicon Valley. And how does a woman that's like a veterans counselor, living alone in her little RV, loving wildlife, coming home every night to enjoy the wildlife, enjoy the water, the creek, and her neighbor he's starting to alter the creek. He's starting to divert water when the water is going to flow and makes an issue of it. And, it was my game warden partner in my absence because it was like hunting season. I'm in Montana, hunting where I'm eventually going to live way back. This is 2012, or this is 2001, 2002 when it started. And, my partner, Marcos, now retired Captain Mark Imsdahl, because I can say his name, he's retired. And one of my right-hand man, fellow snipers on Met, one of the founding members, he met with Debbie and was the last officer to see her alive before JR murdered her because she was speaking up to agencies. And then it became, without giving away everything in the story, it's a mind-blowing story. But he was found guilty of the murder, in prison for life. There was a jury technicality. He got released through the appeal process, and it was never recharged. So he's out in like 9 years. And what's he doing the first year he's out? He's starting to develop it for a cartel cannabis grow, bringing in growers and gunmen from Sinaloa and down to Michoacan. And that's basically the 2012 case that myself and Sergeant John Spagnola teamed up to do before I started the full-time team and co-developed and got to start the Met operation. And he would run the Santa Clara Sheriff's team, and we were brothers. And so those two agencies, we didn't even see the patch difference. Santa Clara was instrumental, and why I love being down here so much, of helping us out on the environmental side when no other agencies were, like the reclamation side. It's one thing to go raid a grow and maybe try to arrest bad guys, but then, okay, we're done. We're getting funded for the plant count. Let's take it up, helicopter it out, get a mule named Stanley if we need to, whatever, take it down. However, we got to get this stuff out, and we're going to get our DSET money. Hey, well, wait a minute, guys. This creek is diverted. That whole creek is dead below it. We got to get the water back. What about all the human excrement, the propane tanks, the fertilizer bags, and all the damaged hillsides that are going to erode into the creek and the fish are dead? If we don't do that, that's like, we don't have a budget for that. We don't have time for that. We're not garbage collectors, whatever. I mean, our own administrators, some of my traditional supervisors are like, no, man. We're not doing the garbage work and, play and help the sheriffs, but come back and do the real game warden work. I'm like, whoa, okay. I don't see a bigger thing killing wildlife long after we're done with this raid that's like a super fun site in my career. So I'm going to call BS on that. And eventually we're going to make this priority. And that became the priority of Met. And Santa Clara and Shasta to some extent, were instrumental in backing our play before we were on our own team. So
you pushed to clear up that garbage. That was something that you wanted to do. I mean,
absolutely.
That's heroic, because I can't imagine a worse site to clean up. And you wanting to do that and fighting to clean up garbage is, wow.
Well, it's one of those things. And, I got not only Mike Carrion, but Nancy Foley, who was another mentor and is a great friend of mine, retired chief, she was our first female chief of patrol, badge number 1. Ran our special operations covert unit, just an awesome woman, amazing professional, and a great friend. And it was her, before we even had a Met team, that said, we're going to get involved in this. And this is right when the shooting happened in 2005. And she's at the hospital, for days, watching my partner come in and out of surgery. So I'm doing that with my teammates. Our director, Ryan Broderick's there, another go-getter. And Nancy said, if we stay in it, what do you think? And I go, well, I think we need to be doing not just arrests and eradication, but we got to restore these grow sites. We have to, or we're not doing anything for the wildlife we're there to protect. I mean, the damage is going to continue long after the grow is raided. And so we started to do that in Santa Clara County with Explorer Scouts, explorers that were going to be sheriffs or wanted to be, and Boy Scouts. And we bring them into ones that didn't have poisons. And we say, okay, guys, we don't have a lot of people. We have some sheriffs, a few game wardens. We're going to go behind Mount Hamilton, Lake Observatory, here above San Jose with this grow we raided. on the Isabel Valley Ranch. It's a Tulio PLM, private land management program. Great ranch, known them forever. And there we are, bagging it up, taking it out, and bagging it, waiting for the helicopter to come get it that day or later. And when we developed MET, we said, okay, we're a three-prong approach, right? Arrest, apprehend, or try to. Don't just scare them away with the helicopter and go in and cut plants. We're going to be a hunting team because at least we're going to put some deterrence in these guys. And we're going to do it with the skills of human operators and with great dogs, life-saving dogs, God bless them, especially Canine Phoebe. We're going to eradicate this stuff safely because it can't make it to the market. 90% of it has carbofuran or some Chinese poison on it now, whatever. And then we're going to reclimate, environmentally restore. And that's the dirty part of the job. And we told agencies we would help them out as a roving team, because the one cool thing about the MET team is we work straight for the Special Operations Division under the Chief of Patrol. It was kind of like the SOCOM model in the U.S. military. SOCOM is Special Operations Command, and they have the Tier 1 groups like Delta, SEAL Team 6, and there's no red tape. It's like, you guys need to go anywhere. We're going to call you to this mission. Go work with who you need to. Train, get training, work with the joining states, work with teams all over California, mandate it. And I said, hey, we're going to be an asset now because this is all we're doing. And we have helicopters and we have equipment and we have assets and we have the best people doing the job and we have 2 great dogs. So the only caveat, guys, if we're going to help you, Siskiyou Sheriff, if we're going to help you, Tulare County, whatever, Mendo, just back us in a reclamation. And we'll bring the helicopter, we'll bring the trucks, we'll bring all the infrastructure, but we're going to need some help. And I guarantee we'll give you the best chance of catching some people. And we'll definitely make sure we help on eradication and we'll be a force multiplier. And there were growing pains to that for a while because not all the agencies wanted to do that. But 2-3 years down the road now, our teams blend so well with our patrol folks and so well with our allied agencies. And everybody's just a force multiplier together. And I've never seen so much teamwork based on something that was such a radical new idea that was so not traditional game warden work to form a spec ops team like that, but have a huge environmental impact and get SWAT teams from other agencies like, I hunt and fish. I love being back there. I'm in, man. Let's bag trash, Lieutenant. I don't care. It's a long day. Let's just keep going, or we'll come back in the winter, or we'll come back in a couple of weeks and do it. At least bag it and stabilize it. And then we'll fly it out later. So at least through the dry and the winter seasons, the pollution doesn't continue. And that was wonderful. And Nancy started that program, and Mike Carry On, again, my other hero and mentor chief and good friend, kept it going. If it hadn't been for those two, there's no way this team would have ever existed under the political climate of the last 2 governors in California. It was completely oxymoronic that we even formed and did what we did. And we had a tight window, a 2-year window it could have happened, and it was under Mike. And Nancy had set the groundwork for it, or we don't have this team. So I still marvel when I talk about it. I kind of get the chills and go, there were a lot of timing things, and I don't proselytize, but I have a Christian background in my faith, and I do believe that God has a plan for all of us. And at certain times just says, okay, here's a crossroads. Go out on this limb. Have faith it won't break. Because it was not a popular concept. It was so, it was so foreign and so intimidating to traditionalists, understandably. One thing, Keely, and I know you've probably seen this with other governmental agencies, one thing with law enforcement or public service, you get into standard operating procedures, you get into a way of doing things, and you have a frame of mind of what game wardens should do and what they shouldn't do. And when change comes, it freaks us all out. In the public sector especially, we're the last to change. We're the last to adapt. Sometimes reluctantly, willingly. But one of the quotes in my book is from old Nancy Foley, right? My friend in chief. And she said, you know what? She tells all her cadets this. At graduation, she would say, guys, I want you to remember something. Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. And we have to think outside the box, and we have to grow to be effective. And it's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be expected, and it's probably going to be a little painful for a while. but look at all the best things. And, and I come from the Silicon Valley, and the Silicon Valley's been nothing but disruptor. The mentality here is everybody is a think tank, and, let's think outside the box. And I remember between books and right before we formed the Met team, I got invited to the graduate engineering program at Stanford, right up the hill from where I'm at, to speak to these grad students at Stanford and all engineering doctors. So I'm like, this is going to be interesting. And I get my PowerPoint all ready, and I got about 30, 40 slides. I get about 15 slides in, Keely, and I got, okay, stop, Lieutenant, we're done. No, we've seen enough. Word groups were starting. They were breaking down, and they were literally coming up with solutions with technology they were working on for drones for the military that could find water lines many feet under the ground. They could find thermal imagery of bad guys under canopy. A normal thermal could. They were just like on fire with passion, and they weren't waiting for approval from anybody. They're just like, let's go. Can you be our, I'm like, whoa, wait, I don't even know if my department will sanction this. I'm just here to educate, give you guys a presentation. And I thought, okay, so, but that's the culture in California. We're very innovative. We just are. There's a lot here that I'm so proud of, and that's part of it. But you could be viewed as a little radical, and if it fails, it's going to fail miserably, but it didn't fail. And now, they're doing exemplary work, and more importantly, they're sending a message on an outreach circuit that's just amazing. And Met can't talk about it. And there's only one existing founding member that is now the lieutenant and leading the team. And it's all new young men on the team. And that young man was actually the nephew of my drum major in marching band in high school.
Oh, wow.
At Live Oak High. And I gave him his first ride along when he was in high school. And I was a 4 or 5 year veteran warden, just being a patrol warden here, close to where I'm sitting today. And he's now the team leader. He's running the sniper unit. And that tells you how much it's evolved. And there's been 2 lieutenants before him that ran the team after I left. So the amount of change in Met to adapt to the issues has been light speed for, traditional law enforcement speeds. And that's what we're trying to show other states. For like, guys, we had so many growing pains getting to where we got. That first gunfight, the equipment we didn't have, the inability, lack of radio communication, compatibility, lack of enough trauma medic supplies. I do a whole officer-involved shooting debrief on 4 of our shootings for LE groups with the PowerPoint, with the radio traffic, with the breakdown and lessons learned. And I go, if we knew then even a fraction of what we know now, let me save you that trouble. Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. And by the good graces, my partner didn't die that day because he was this close to dying. Just mind blowing.
Yeah, that 2005 gunfight, which you actually don't include in this book in detail. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that was very pivotal for you and for your career?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, you're right. I didn't cover it in Hidden War. I referenced it, and it's covered. It's the second chapter in War in the Woods. And that book is available too on Amazon if anyone wants to read the detailed account. But I've told the story a lot, and it was August 5th of 2005, one of those dates that you never forget. Anniversary carved in stone. It was only the second big grow operation I had ever done with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. The first one was the one my buddy Gia and I found on the Palisu with all the water dried up and the dead fish and frogs. Well, that was run by a task force that we worked with one time. And there was no cleanup involved there. And that's something I pointed out to the team leader. And he said, we just don't do that. And it was his operation. There was no harm, no foul, but I clocked that for what we want to do in the future. But the best part about that first mission, Keely, was I ended up meeting 2 of the most awesome sheriff's deputies that came from a hunting, fishing, conservation, cattle ranching background, familiar with all of it in other states or in the existing state. And, I made friends with them and they made friends with me. And so they're like, hey, man, your wardens are really savvy. You guys work great in the woods. I lead the marijuana enforcement team. There's only 2 of us and we borrow from our SWAT guys. Can you come help us on this raid? And the mission was August 5th, 2005. And my young partner, Mojo, his call sign, and Bulldog, the call sign of the other young warden from San Mateo County, they were raring to go do a raid after what they had seen of our experiences, and I I just promoted to be my partner's supervisor. I'd taken a promotion to lieutenant for 2.5 counties. So I wasn't just a warden in the squad. I was overseeing 7 of us in 2.5 counties. And they really wanted to go on a raid. They're both great game wardens. I mean, out of the gate, 1%ers, warden of the year types, highly decorated, all that. They were just destined for success. And wonderful, amazing, amazing young men. And I said, yeah, you guys are safe. Let's do it. So it was me, 2 wardens, 2 sheriff's deputies on the Met team, and 1 other sheriff deputy to help them that was a Marine Corps veteran and was another sniper. Call sign was Apache, and he's unfortunately passed away at a very early age a couple years ago, possibly from the carbofurion, the poison exposures in the grows. And we have 1 unarmed park ranger for Mid-Peninsula Open Space named Ben Guzman, who was our bird dog. He had initially found it and kind of got it organized to how we were going to approach it. The sheriff's department had scouted it to make sure it was there and learned approaches. And we were brought in to raid it on that day. And what we thought was, 5, 6, 7,000 plants. We'd later learn was closer to 10,000 plants and was only one of 5 or 6 complexes on that whole mountainside that was 23,000 something plants and had been in play for a long time. I mean, it was just a cartel mecca up on that whole ridge for miles. And when we were crawling up that mountain to get into to the grow and clear it, hot day, super hot in the morning. We got a little bit of tactical disadvantage because we're going gradually up. It was the only way to approach this thing quietly and tactically, but it wasn't the best ideal approach. And sometimes you just got to deal with that. And we went through 1 small grow and everything felt really, really weird, really off. You've been in the woods a lot, and there are days, imagine you go into an area that you should hear birds chirping, you should hear small game running around and rodents and things like that. And it was just dead. Nothing was living in the area. You could see the trails. I already knew this was going to be a big grow. Haven't been in 1 or a couple before. And when we went through got into the second grow site, it was just 5, 6 foot marijuana plants, a bunch of manzanita, and it was on a ridge top that probably spanned about maybe 30 yards across, right? And so we go into what's called a skirmish line, which is a tactical formation where you're kind of spread out evenly so you don't get ahead or behind each other in case there's a threat ahead. You don't have a crossfire situation with another officer, but you're not missing a booby trap. You're not missing a water line. You're not missing a bad guy hiding below you. You're not missing a tripwire or whatever. And we're just moving through there. And I remember an orange 5-gallon pretty green camouflage painted Home Depot 5-gallon bucket that you buy at Home Depot for whatever. You see them everywhere. And I had just passed that, and then we heard a shot ring out, and it was 1 shot. And I remember before I even heard my partner scream that I knew right away that wasn't from one of our rifles, because it wasn't the big boom of our M14s, which fires a 308, which is a hunting round. The 7.62 version is a machine gun round, right? A 30 caliber. And it wasn't a 5.56. It wasn't out of an AR-15 or an M4 carbine. That's got a crack. It's a 22 caliber round. This was more like a 30-30 or what I feared like an AK-47 round. And I've heard a lot of those. And that's what it was. And nanosecond later, my partner, I'm hit. Blah, blah, blah. Bunch of colorful superlatives. I'm hit. That blah, blah, blah shot me. And instantly, I'm hearing gunfire. And all this is happening in just nanoseconds. My partner was off to my left a little bit. I see him kind of drop out of sight when he's hit in peripheral vision. I start to hear gunfire from 5.56s, knowing it's my sheriff partner's to the right of me. And so I have my big old M14, and I'm going to start scanning that way to see if there's something I'm missing that I need to deal with to help them. And I remember all I can see when I turn to the right is the marijuana is so tall, I can't see bodies, but I can see the plants parting from the gases coming out of the muzzle of those carbines my partners were shooting. Unbeknownst to me, they were engaging another grower that was kneeling down behind a kind of a camouflage position, half in a dugout parapet where they had a trash dump behind them. They were in a tactical, basically a brace position with, a berm setup that if you shot low enough, you'd have to shoot through the berm. And that guy had a shotgun, we later learned, pointed right at me and bulldog at 7 yards. And I couldn't see him with what was in front of me. And again, I think, the good Lord was looking down on us that day, Keely, and I do not say that lightly, because his Apache and Snake basically engaged that suspect within a second or two of him pulling the trigger and taking me and or my partner out with a face full of buckshot. And when that happened, immediately I'm looking for a threat over there. I have no idea they put that threat down. God bless them and thank you guys. And then I'm starting to look that way and I see movement out of the left side of my eye. And it's another grower coming around the corner in brush, in a lot of thick cover. And I later learned that it was my partner shooter. And he had been the one that fired the one round from the rifle, which was like an SKS, which is looked like a hunting rifle stock version of a AK-47, and was coming around the corner to get away, to maybe see what he shot or maybe finish the job. We don't know. And I see that guy making a move. And immediately I shift my weapon over and I start to say, police, see ya, and I get about halfway through that word in Spanish, and his gun's coming up on me, and I'm engaging and backpedaling. And I remember backpedaling tactically, don't remember doing it, but we were trained, fortunately, advanced enough at that point in tactics to do the same thing the sheriffs would do, even though we hadn't trained together yet. And I ended up, my left foot was on the boots of my partner, who's now on the ground. He shot. And rather than panic or scream or be a victim, talk about a tough warrior, he had to drop his big M1A because it's a heavy rifle, because he's got bullet holes, 4 bullet holes through both legs. And he's got his Glock pistol out and he's covering the team and himself while he's on the ground. And he's got his left hand over his inner right thigh where he can feel a huge hole and missing tissue to basically do what he can to stop whatever bleeding he hasn't even seen yet. And it's on. And so immediately we're in a 360. We're calling a sit rep to see who's hurt. No one else has taken fire. We got one guy down. We got another guy. We don't know where he is, if he's down. And now we're waiting. We're calling the cavalry. I'm doing triage trauma medicine as best I can on my partner. The bullet entered his left thigh, and it was a steel core 7.62 by 39 AK-47 round. And for listeners that aren't familiar, that's a military design bullet that's made to do one thing: penetrate deeply and tumble when it hits obstacles. So it's boomeranging through his legs. It enters as a solid hole, 30 caliber hole in his left outer thigh, and now it's tumbling out of his inner left thigh, and then it's boomeranging in through his right thigh. So he had like a softball or grapefruit size part of his inner thigh on his right leg, where it was worse, gone. And by some miracle, that bullet did not hit the femoral artery. Or there's no way, with what we had, even if it had hit the femoral with tourniquets and everything else, he realistically doesn't survive that within 90 seconds. But it was enough, a couple millimeters away from the femoral, and we had enough trauma supplies, courtesy of the sheriff's department and a combat, a military veteran like Apache, who had stuff that we needed. And he survived. He kept his total pain. Working on that wound. We're keeping it 360. We don't know if there's more threats out there. We're calling the cavalry to get us out of there. Helicopter after helicopter is going by. We're popping our smoke grenades, basically our smoke canisters, to show where we're at. So they'll send down a basket and helicopter. And we find out these are news choppers. And they're coming in, Bay Area news, right? Silicon Valley foothills. Gunfight. Young officer, somebody shot. This has never happened in the history of America, that any grower had shot and injured or killed an American law enforcement member. And now it's national news going out in real time. And we're still on the Hill dealing with this incident. And so about 2.5 hours in, Mojo looks at me and goes, "John, I can't keep my eyes open. I got to go to sleep. I got to rest." I said, stay with us. His pupils were doing the dilation, and he was just going into shock, fighting it the whole time. And I knew if he went unconscious, I knew if he went out, I just knew in my soul he was not going to wake up. And I'm terrified that that's his first mission. trained him in the academy. He's doing great work. He needed to go on this mission for all the right reasons. And if he doesn't make it off this hill and he doesn't survive this ordeal, I don't know where I go next. I don't know what our department does next, but you can just imagine the unknowns. But all you can do, man, is fill and flow, right? 3-foot rule. What can I control 3 feet in front of me? But I'm like you. I'm always overthinking things. I'm always trying to do the best job, and I'm trying to think 5 steps ahead. Now I'm just frozen in this moment, and I'm completely helpless. And one thing as a law enforcement guy that's confident is that feeling of helplessness. It is really hard to deal with, and it's really, really agonizing. And what I'm going through and what my partners are going through, the sheriffs are feeling the same thing. My partner, what's he going through more than anything else? I mean, here he is a year on and a rock star in his career. So bottom line, again, incredibly blessed that day because we finally had the Huey helicopter from CAL FIRE fly in from the Alma station on Highway 17. And everybody that we were calling for help were telling us, the dispatcher for Santa Clara Sheriff's would say, okay, guys, ETA is 15 minutes. Okay, great. 15 minutes would go by. No helicopter. What's going on? And it's not my operation. It's a sheriff's operation. So Rails is the call sign for now a sergeant and a sniper team leader, great guy. He's doing the radio dispatch for them. And he keeps telling me it's a 15 minute. This has gone on an hour. Finally, I'm like, can I talk to your dispatch? Sure. So I get on the phone. I go, hey, we have an officer. He's bleeding out. He's not going to survive another 15-minute interval. I need somebody to get him now. And the sheriffs are pushing this. And finally they said, sorry. And the dispatcher, Mary is the dispatcher, was her name. And I don't think she was a dispatcher after. I think she retired because of this incident, because it was horrible. She was so helpless and nobody would go in that she was calling for help to actually go into the hot zone. They said, wait a minute, is the scene secure? Are there any more gunmen on that mountain? We're like, we've only cleared this part of the grow. We can't say for sure. So these helicopter units wouldn't come in, of fear of getting shot down. So finally I got on the phone and I said, yep. And I looked at my partner and my sheriff's buddies looked at me and I go, yep. And they go, yep, we've got this part of the mountain secure. Send us help. And the CAL FIRE pilot and that battalion chief said, whether it's secure or not, we're not going to wait. I'll take the heat. And they flew in, lowered a medic on a basket. We got him with the medic, flew Mojo out. And then we're on our way out short hauling under helicopters for the first time about 15-20 minutes later, and just hoping that he's going to land. And he's over to Valley Med. He goes into surgery immediately. And myself, being one of the shooters in the incident, and all of us being on deck or around it, we spent, till very late that night in the sheriff's office with DA investigators and officer involved shooting investigators and videotapes and our attorneys for our union and all that, going through that story, dissecting it, and just wanting to get that part done, not worrying about the ramifications of that, just to get to the damn hospital to check on my partner, check on my brother. And I'll tell you, Keely, when I finally left interviews and I got over to Valley Med and I saw Nancy Foley there, our chief, and Ryan Broderick, our director, I was like, okay, this is it. This is Mama and Papa Bear right here. They're not just here as administrators. This is the craziest thing Nancy's ever seen, being our chief. And I know Ryan's never seen this, but Ryan comes from game warden days of being a game warden years before I was in Merced County, right over the hill at San Luis, loving those same Thule elk. He's long since retired now and a rock star. We still stay in touch. And they were so supportive. And they took on press. They took on a ton of skepticism, like governor's office. People were coming down press like, what's a game warden doing on a drug raid? What'd they do to get that kid shot? What is going on? And Nancy got in front of all those news cameras. So did Lori Smith, the sheriff, And Nancy said, this is an environmental crime. My game wardens are trained to be tactical and professional. They behaved incredibly brave and tactically savvy. They did great work today. I'm extremely proud of them. And now we're pulling for our officer who's in, surgery, and she completely supported us 100%. And I know the pressure from the governor's office was just crazy. And Ryan did the same thing. So that put a pep in our step. And it wasn't that night. I don't even remember if it was the next day or the end of the second or third day that we were at the hospital, just me and Bulldog, getting to talk to Mojo with his eyes open, in and out of anesthesia, going through the surgeries, and just be there, and be as supportive as we could, and then do everything we could while we weren't there, because we were on a couple of weeks of administrative leave, which everybody goes through that after an officer involved shooting. But one thing I got to do was talk to my sheriff's partners, and all we were concerned with, and our families, God bless them for their patience, because we maniacally could not let this go. There were so many answers we needed. There were so many things we wish we could have done different. It's the nature of a gunfight, especially with an enemy of this magnitude. And what I was processing was, we were relieved that my partner was going to survive. Would he come back to work? Man, after an injury like that, you would think not. But by the good graces, 6 months, he's like, I'm ready to hike. I'm like, are you sure, dude? And he came back at full duty. And
Wow.
he even to this day, physically he was okay, and got strong really quick with all the damage to his thighs. But psychologically, after that, officer safety, going into situations being really, really heated with anything to potentially go wrong. I can't stress enough the use of those psychological resources and counselors that we work with, and victim assistance programs, and all those different things. So we weren't familiar with any of that, and one thing we learned right away, and Nancy was right on board, is we immediately started grabbing the equipment we needed. She did not take us out of that work. She said, okay, we learned it's a dangerous job, guys. And, what we thought we knew, we hadn't a clue, basically. And I was the district rep for this part of California of the Firearms Defensive Tactics Committee at the time. And that was kind of a coveted position as a firearms and defensive tactics instructor, where you're part of a more elite group of representatives and older mentors and other experts, 7 or 8 to 10 of us for the whole state, that are learning new tactics, new weapons, new procedures, new medical supplies, and bringing that to change our policy and our procedures and our equipment to update that, to get more modern, more progressive. And so I had all kinds of ideas. I was already on this committee. And I'm like, oh no, weaponry, lights, optics, trauma supplies, and our admin was great. Within 2-3 months after that shooting, we were back in the game, and we were working with sheriffs now, the same ones, and continuing to do more and more work. And we would subsequently have 5 more officer involved shootings, if you count the one up to 2017 that's in this book. And that one went by the numbers because of the training and the experience and the preparation. But it's an imprecise science, and it's a very dangerous game. And I just commend my brothers and sisters still doing it every dang day, and being able to sing their praises, because very few people are,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't believe you received any skepticism. That's makes me so angry to hear. But I noticed in the way that you tell all of these stories, and I noticed this in your book, you just constantly give credit to the people that you work with, the dogs that you work with. It's very humble, and you look toward the future of, how can I fix this problem? How can I be part of the solution? How can I volunteer to clean up these woods? And John, I just have to tell you, you're the hero of this story, of fixing a problem that feels hopeless, and to still have optimism, and to still constantly have gratitude for the people that you work with, and to not give yourself credit. I'm just humbled to be talking with you, and thank you for the service that you've done for this country, truly, and for the place that I love, for my home state. You've been at the tip of the spear in this, and you talk about the dogs being exposed to carbifurans, and and how Phoebe passed away from an incurable cancer. You had another dog the same, but you exposed yourself to those same toxins and cleaning up the woods time and time again. So you truly don't get enough credit for fighting a hidden war. Veterans get credit. We appreciate them. We thank our veterans multiple days in the year. They deserve gratitude every single day. But you've been fighting a war here in our country that very few people even know about for your entire career.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Keely, for the support, and man, I just adore you on every level because you are so passionate about the things in America that matter and the things that matter in our home state. And I still consider this still my home state. I got two home states. California's never not going to be home, to some extent, but you know, um, I was so lucky. I was so blessed when you talk about the team. And I mean, when even before I got to pick the best of the best, right? And when you have guys that are so tactically skilled and so passionate about what they do, and they're so selfless, and they will do anything for anybody else. They will jump in front. We'll take bullets for each other. I mean, it's not even a cliche. It's not even a joke. They made my job as a leader of that team an absolute dream. I mean, you want to talk about heroes? Those are my heroes. All I had to do as a team leader is be there for them, give them all the equipment I could possibly give them, send them all the training they could, answer the phone at any hour when they needed me, and rely on them, you know, as subject matter experts. And I think it really comes down to those exceptional officers making all of us shine. Me too, you know, and I think when Mojo was shot, that young man, and now neither of us are so young anymore. That was a while ago. I mean, 2005, that incident feels like it was 10 years ago. Let's look at the math. I mean, we just came up on our 20-year anniversary of that event. And every single year on August 5th, there's phone calls or texts at least exchanged. I mean, one sheriff's retired, Snake and a sniper and a good friend. He's all the way in Pennsylvania. You know, I got other guys that are deceased. I got other widows that I hear from on that day because we built brotherhoods for life and friendships for life over what we experienced. And we learned from each other and we relied on each other. And I think, again, the career's been like drinking through a fire hose. Some days you just exponentially grow as a leader or you don't. And that day it was tested for me personally. So selfishly, I think I learned a lot in a good way that day, as agonizing as it was. And I don't think we would be close or even having this conversation, or we would have stayed in the game had we had a fatality that day. And again, I'm definitely a man of faith in believing that God had a big part of that day, because when we dissected this as operators on the team, and we're all talking about it every day collectively, right? While Mojo's in the hospital and can't hardly talk for days, I go, you realize that if you guys didn't do that, and I don't see this, and I don't see him, and Mojo doesn't do this, I mean, I was blown away that we didn't have more, not fatalities, but injuries, that more shots weren't exchanged, that those guys didn't execute more gunfire. There was at least one or two other gunmen we know in that grow. And we know of when we cleared that site and people in our absence, when we were pulled off that mountain, they were up there for 3 days. I mean, there were two camp teams here, the helicopter teams that our officers are part of. Every SWAT team in the Bay Area was guarding perimeters on the outlet roads, you know, up into the vineyards that go up into that country. It was DEA, my friends in DEA that I was tactically training with on the side from the San Jose office, where everybody knew who it was. And to see the pouring out of love and support from allied agency law enforcement, from the top level federal agency to the state agency to local police, for game wardens and sheriffs get into the first, you know, going Western event that we'd ever encounter. And we were very lucky. But it also made us a lot better quickly at what we were going to continue to do. And that's what makes me the most proud, is how everybody responded and what it led to. And I appreciate telling the story with you. I haven't gone into it like this, and certain aspects of it haven't really visited in a long time. And it's good to revisit it. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for taking the time to go through it. And I'm sure it's a heavy story. We're about a week. We're literally a week from I
We
guess
are.
to be the 21st anniversary of that happening.
It's
And when you tell that
wild, wild
story,
timing. Wow.
yeah, and when you tell that story, you could focus on the people who failed you guys, the circling helicopters and the governor's office questioning you or having any criticism whatsoever, but you focus on your team. I've been thinking about how, there's a lot of despair in the country right now, younger generations coming out of COVID. There's a focus on what's gone wrong and what we've lost or what we've left behind. Um, and I'm inspired by the fact that you focus instead on the positives. You focus on serving your country. Even still in your position as a retired lieutenant, you're still out there talking about what your guys did and what your team did and raising awareness, which is so important, knowing that they can't do that for themselves as easily as you can. And I'm just so impressed by that. And I just want to thank you for that example for young Americans and for young people listening. I guess just one last question as we wrap here. Given what you've seen, given all of these dark truths that you've been aware of, and I know a little bit, not nearly to the level that you do, but a little bit how frustrating it can be to cover issues that are ignored by the mainstream or issues that are not addressed or people who feel like they're not being heard. That can be isolating, that can be frustrating. What gives you hope for the future, and what gives you a sense of optimism for this next generation? How do you maintain that in light of your career? What would you say to kids who may be feeling a little bit of that despair themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question, Keely. And I would say this. I use the term the 3-foot rule, and that comes from a book called No Easy Day. Matt Bissonette, who was one of the shooters, one of the SEAL Team 6 development group operators that was on the Bin Laden mission. And he talks about the 3-foot rule. And it became kind of a leadership term of mine in that, focus on what you can control and don't make yourself crazy and insecure and full of anxiety by things that you can't control. What can I control under bad cannabis regulation, sanctuary state doctrine in California and all that? It's really easy. And you know this because you're spirited in all the same right areas to continue to push for change, regardless of how effective we are right away or not, because you can't give up. Because ultimately, people can suck sometimes, especially politics and power and money. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I completely see that. But I look at this and I tell my guys all the time, especially now, and I'm going to be having lunch with the lieutenant that replaced me, who's a really good friend and a fellow sniper, and he's back in patrol. He's not even in med anymore. And I'm going to see him tomorrow for lunch. And we have these talks all the time about how eroding politics are getting and how bad it's getting in California. And like I told him when I was retiring, and I continue to tell this story, I said, well, okay, no matter how bad politics get, did you go out and did you take out an illegal grow today? Yes. Did you take out a lot of plants that had a lot of poisonous chemicals that could have slowly killed a child or a medicinal patient or somebody that thought they were getting an organically certified seed to sale plant for whatever use? Yes. Did you take out a grow that, had you not taken it out, would have taken out 6 to 7 to even more zeros at the end of the gallon calculation in the millions of gallons of water from California that so desperately needs water? Yes. And did you stop those guys from doing a crime that day and put the fear of God in them? Yes. So you did something good. You saved some lives, you saved some wildlife, and you played whack-a-mole, admittedly, but you did some good. So I think, I grew up under the mantra with mom and dad, and we didn't have a lot of resources growing up, but what we had was the 3-foot rule. And my mom especially would say, hey, listen, anything you do that you're committed to, do it well or don't do it at all. And don't ever do anything. Don't commit to something professionally or personally you're not passionate about. Because if you're really passionate about something, you will do amazing things. Don't do it for money. Don't do it for status in a profession. Don't do it to be popular. Follow your heart, and things are going to work out. And they instilled that thing that you and I both love so much, and that is what Western culture epitomizes, and that is love for the great outdoors, love for a rural community, love for wildlife, wildlands, and waterways, and everything that entails. And every little thing we do counts, So I am a hopeless optimist, but I'm a realist at the same time. And I tell young people, I go, you're coming in with a lot more tools than I had, a lot more knowledge, and a lot more people in the fight. And I said, and I'm not out of the fight. I said, me and the Keeleys of the world are doing everything we can with the pen and the voice and getting people behind us on the left and the right. And I really have seen a change. I've seen the unification from the left and the right over this issue. And I brought growers and they would have just batted heads, before. And like you said, you've seen both sides with the growers, and I know some great ones that are friends and they're exemplary and they lead the charge to be ambassadors. And that's how we take a universal enemy, a domestic terrorist, and we all get behind it. And young people can say, you know what? I can be part of that fight. I can be part of that fight. And I don't even have to agree with everybody that I'm in that fight with. I can agree with it just for the blessings that this great nation offers, and that it hopefully will offer more of if we correct this problem a little bit more. And ultimately, I mean, like you, I was raised to do everything I could to make a difference wherever I'm supposed to make a difference. So I'm rewarded in the frustration. I'm rewarded in the challenge. And I think I'm speaking to a kindred spirit when I say I don't like easy things. I like challenges. That's why I go after these amazingly smart alpha coyote packs and that don't cooperate when they're taking my elk and my cattle calves down, and they're whatever, it's any, or, doing a project or, putting a book out or whatever we're doing in the outreach circuit. It's just, man, what are we here for otherwise? It just makes the downtime that much more rewarding, right? It really does. Yeah. It makes me feel like I've done something that mom and dad and grandfather put on me, and hopefully I'm pushing that on to the next generation and kids, grandkids, nieces and nephews. And you've got a little one now that's in great shape with the two of you amazing parents. And that's the next generation of America. And that's the hope I have. That keeps me optimistic. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Well, I thought I would end this conversation feeling very fired up and pissed off, and I'm feeling all inspired and hopeful instead. That's the effect of you. So that's why you need to follow everything John Norris does in his book. And you made me think of a verse that just came to mind as you were speaking. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Yes. When you think about a problem like the cartels in the California woods, something that feels so overwhelming, just to do what you can and to speak truth and be a light. I'm so inspired. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being a voice. I just couldn't appreciate you more. Everybody, please follow every single thing he does. Buy this book to start with. And we'll be just continuing to cheer whatever you do next, whether it's speaking in Congress or filming a documentary. You've made such a difference for rural America. Thank you.
Well, Keely, thank you. This has been, a most enjoyable conversation. I've been looking forward to diving in with you. I knew the time would come, and perfect time. And it goes without saying, anything I can do to help your efforts. You're part of that thin green line. You're at the tip of that thin green line. You're doing some great things at the federal level, at the local level. And what I love about it is you're getting national attention, and we're both striving to do that to California issues that relate to what makes America good. Cattle industry, agriculture, community safety, all those different things. So please keep doing what you're doing. I'm cheerleading for you as well. And I look forward to doing a lot of good stuff with you in the future. It's been an honor being here. Thank you so much for having me on today.